The flowers alone had cost $11,000. Nathan knew this because he'd overheard two of the event coordinators talking about it in the service corridor at 4 in the afternoon while he was replacing the liners in the waste bins along the wall. $11,000 for white roses, another $8,000 for the centerpiece arrangements on the 32 round tables in the Grand Meridian ballroom. The chandeliers, which hung from the ceiling like something out of an old European palace, and which Nathan's coworker Darnell had spent 3 hours polishing with a cloth that probably cost more than Nathan's work shirt, threw light across all of it in a way that turned the whole room gold. Nathan had seen a lot of expensive hotel events in 4 years of working for Meridian Hospitality Services. Weddings, corporate galas, anniversary dinners for people who needed a 100-piece orchestra and a carved ice sculpture to feel adequately celebrated. He'd stopped being impressed by them roughly 18 months in. What he'd noticed, working these events, was that the more money got spent on an evening, the less people actually seemed to enjoy it. Too much effort had gone into making everything perfect, and perfection was exhausting to maintain. People at these galas spent so much energy performing happiness that they never quite got around to feeling it. Tonight was the Harrington Children's Medical Foundation annual charity dinner. 400 guests, black tie, a $500 a plate minimum contribution. The money was supposed to fund renovations at Harrington's pediatric wing, new imaging equipment, updated surgical suites, a sensory room for kids with neurological conditions. It was a good cause, genuinely. Nathan had nothing cynical to say about the cause. He just also had a mop to push and a shift that ended at 11 and a 7-year-old son at home who had been promised his father would be there in the morning to make pancakes. He worked the edges. That was the job at these events. Stay near the walls, stay out of sight lines, handle spills and messes before they became visible to guests. Be there and not be there simultaneously. Nathan had gotten good at it. He had the kind of body language that read as neutral, unthreatening, part of the furniture. Medium height, lean from years of physical work, face that some people called serious and other people called closed off, depending on their relationship to him. He moved quietly. He'd learned that much. His supervisor Dennis found him at 8:15, just as the ballroom noise was reaching its post-cocktail hour peak. Cole. Dennis had the look he always got at big events, the slightly hunted expression of a man monitoring 14 things simultaneously. Champagne spill near coat check. East corridor. It's glass too, so careful with it. Got it. And then I need you on the south side hallway, near the service entrance. What's happening there? Dennis glanced at his tablet. VIP arrival, late entrance, Evelyn Hart. Nathan didn't react to the name, but he knew it the way most people knew it. From the covers of business magazines, from the news cycle, from the kind of ambient cultural awareness that accumulates around certain people, whether you seek it out or not. Evelyn Hart, 30 years old, founder and CEO of Hart Capital, a private equity firm that had spent the past 5 years buying up struggling mid-sized companies, restructuring them, and making Evelyn Hart worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 billion. She was on the foundation's board. Of course she was. Clear path, service entrance side, Nathan said. I'll handle it. He took care of the champagne spill first. Ground glass and wet carpet required care. You had to do it right, or someone eventually found a shard with the bottom of their foot. And he worked through it methodically, wearing thick gloves, taking his time. When he was done, he bagged the glass separately, labeled it, and carried it to the service disposal point, and then made his way back toward the south side hallway. It was quieter there. A set of heavy double doors separated the hallway from the main ballroom, and through the small rectangular windows set into the doors, Nathan could see the periphery of the event. White tablecloths, evening gowns, the backs of heads, the string quartet somewhere out of frame. He took his position near the wall and waited. He was not looking at his phone. He'd left it in his locker before the shift because it was a formal event and having your phone out got you written up. So he was just standing, which he was not particularly good at, thinking about whether Marcus had eaten the dinner misses. Delgado was supposed to have made him, and whether he'd fought her about the vegetables, because Marcus was going through a phase where anything green was treated as a personal insult. The side entrance door opened. A woman came through first, earpiece, posture of someone in continuous threat assessment mode, eyes scanning the hallway the way you scan a room you're responsible for. She looked at Nathan exactly once, registered him as staff, and filed him away. Then she held the door. A man in a dark suit. Another woman, older, in a gray dress. And then, a girl in a wheelchair. She was small. Dark hair pulled back with a white ribbon, pale blue dress, white gloves, white shoes she'd never be able to feel the floor through. She sat very straight. Someone had trained her to sit that way, you could tell. The straightness was managed and slightly effortful rather than natural. And she was looking at the hallway with eyes that missed nothing. Quick eyes. The kind that had spent time in rooms full of adults and learned to read them fast. She was 10, Nathan would later find out. She looked younger. Kids in wheelchairs sometimes did. Something about the chair made you see them as smaller, more fragile than they actually were. He would later learn to stop doing that automatically. For now, he just saw a small girl in a fancy dress sitting very straight and looking around with those careful, assessing eyes. The woman with the earpiece bent down and said something to her. The girl nodded, not an enthusiastic nod, the kind you give when you've heard something before. And then Evelyn Hart came through the door. She was in a dark green gown, fitted, sleeveless despite the October chill outside, and she moved with the ease of someone who had been going to events like this since before she could drive. Her hair was dark, pinned up, a few pieces loose at the temples in a way that was either effortless or carefully calculated to look effortless. Nathan genuinely could not tell. She was on her phone, speaking quietly, one finger pressed to her other ear to block out the ambient noise. Her eyes went immediately to the girl in the wheelchair. Something happened on her face that she didn't fully control. It was there and gone quickly. A flash of something that was neither happiness nor sadness exactly, but the complicated territory between them where parents lived when they loved someone they couldn't fix. Then the professional face came back, composed and pleasant, and she ended her call. Lily. She crouched slightly to be more at the girl's level. How are you feeling? You ready? The girl, Lily, looked up at her. I'm fine. Because we really don't have to stay for the whole... Mom. Lily's voice was patient in the particular way of a child who has had this conversation many times. I'm fine. Can we go in? A pause. Evelyn straightened. Yeah, okay. Nathan had his eyes on the hallway wall. He was very interested in the hallway wall. Nick. The formal program began at 8:30. Nathan could hear it through the doors, the microphone feedback as the foundation director adjusted her distance from the stand, the applause when she introduced the evening's lead donor, the particular quality of silence that descends on a room full of wealthy people when someone is asking them to give money. He had no reason to look through the doors. He looked anyway. Through the small window, he could see the edge of the event layout, the nearest cluster of round tables, the outer edge of the dance floor, a portion of the crowd. Evelyn Hart's table was visible in the mid-distance. He could see Lily at the edge of it, her wheelchair positioned slightly apart from the configuration of regular chairs, the way wheelchair users often ended up positioned, adjacent, technically present, but separated by the physics of furniture arrangement. She was watching the dance floor. The program had ended and the dancing had started, the string quartet back in, playing something slow, and guests were beginning to move onto the floor. Lily was watching them. She had her gloved hands in her lap, very still, and she was watching the dancers with an expression Nathan couldn't fully read from this distance, but that he felt he recognized somehow, in the back of some older knowledge. He'd worked with kids, not in the past few years, not as anything official, but he'd studied it, and the studying had never fully gone out of him. He knew the look of a child who was measuring a distance they didn't think they could cross. He went back to watching the hallway. He was halfway to the service corridor when he heard the wheels, soft rubber on marble. Not loud, just present. He turned. Lily Hart had come through the side door by herself. Somehow, he hadn't heard the door, hadn't heard anything. She'd been completely quiet about it. She'd gotten herself into the hallway, and now she was stopped about 8 feet away from him, looking at him with those direct, assessing eyes. Up close, they were dark brown, nearly black. Serious eyes. Smarter than the situation required. Her gloves were creased at the fingers like she'd been pressing her hands together. Hi, she said. Nathan looked behind her. No one. The door had swung closed. Hi, he said. You're the janitor. I am. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "Will you dance with me?" Nathan opened his mouth, closed it again. The music started again, Lily said, as though this answered an objection he hadn't made yet. And nobody's dancing except the old people, which is really boring to watch. A pause. You were watching through the window earlier. I saw you. He felt heat come up the back of his neck. I was checking the sheet. I'm not judging you. I was watching too. She looked at him. You move nice, even just walking. Most people don't move nice. He looked down at his work uniform. The name badge, the slightly scuffed shoes. I'm working. I know, but it's a slow song. She said it simply, not pleading. She wasn't the pleading type. He already understood that about her, just stating something she believed to be true. It'll be over in like 3 minutes. Nathan Cole had not danced in 5 years. He had not danced since the summer before his wife Renata got her diagnosis, when they'd gone to a friend's backyard wedding and stayed too late and danced to songs that were too slow for the tempo and didn't care. He had not danced since the world had broken open and reformed into something smaller. He had not danced because dancing required a certain openness that he didn't have the energy to maintain on top of everything else. The rent, the job, the raising of a boy who needed a father who showed up every day, whether or not he felt like showing up. He looked at this girl in her pale blue dress with her white gloves and her dark, serious eyes and her hands folded in her lap. He said, "What's your name?" "Lily." "Nathan." She held out her hand. The white glove, formal, slightly absurd, completely earnest. He took it. He pushed the ballroom door open with his shoulder and they went in. The thing was, he didn't plan it. There was no thought process beyond the moment. No calculation of what it would look like, no awareness of the room, no consideration of the 400 people in evening wear who turned as the side door opened and saw a girl in a wheelchair rolling in alongside a man in a janitor's uniform. He didn't register any of that. He registered the music, 3/4 time, a waltz, the kind of tempo that sits in the body below conscious thought, and the dance floor, and Lily's hand in his, and the distance between the door and the center of the floor. They moved together. He kept his steps small. He'd learned that a long time ago, in the coursework he'd never finished at Pacific State, in the movement therapy labs where they'd practiced adapting partnered dance for students with varying mobility. Keep your steps in range of your partner's center of gravity. Don't lead with momentum. Let the music do the pulling. He stayed at her level, close to the chair, and they moved in a slow circle, and the floor opened up around them the way it sometimes does when people give you space they didn't plan to give. Because the room had gone quiet. Not all at once. It happened in sections, like a wave going out from the center. The couples on the dance floor stopped first, pulling back, creating a circle of space around Nathan and Lily. Then the people at the nearest tables looked up. Then the people further back. The string quartet played on for another bar, 2 bars, and then one by one the instruments dropped out until only the cello was still going. And then the cello too fell silent. And in the quiet, Nathan could hear the faint sound of Lily's wheels on the dance floor and the soft fall of his own footsteps and his own breathing. He didn't stop. Stopping felt wrong. Stopping would make it a moment, a scene, something to be observed and interpreted. If he kept moving, it was just a dance. They're all staring, Lily said quietly. Her chin was up. Her posture was still impeccable. I know. Is that bad? He thought about it honestly. I don't think so. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, 1, 2, 3. He almost missed a step. What? You're counting, under your breath. 1, 2, 3. A pause. I can hear you. He hadn't known he was doing it. He hadn't known until she said it that he'd been counting out loud, barely, just under the breath, the way it had come back to him automatically when the music started. Sorry. Don't be sorry. Teach me. And so he counted, and she counted with him, quietly, under the chandeliers in the silent room. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And they moved in their slow circle while 400 people watched without making a sound, and phones came out along the edges of the room, and somewhere near the back someone had started crying, though Nathan wouldn't know that until later. Lily was smiling, not a performance smile, not a "this is what I do when adults are" watching smile. It was the real thing, the kind that takes over a face from the inside and doesn't ask permission. She was smiling up at him with her whole face, the formal posture gone slightly loose, and she looked like a completely different child than the one who had been sitting at the edge of her mother's table watching other people move. "You're good at this," she said. "You're not bad yourself." "I know. Not arrogant, just factual." He laughed, and she laughed, and the cello started up again because the cellist apparently decided the moment needed it, and the other instruments came back in one by one, and the song swelled back up around them like something that had been waiting. When it ended, Lily let go of his hand and sat back. For a moment she was simply still, looking at the space where her hand had been, and Nathan was still too. Then the room broke like a wave. The applause was the kind that starts somewhere and takes over everything. Not polite applause, not gala applause, but genuine noise. People on their feet without deciding to stand, the sound filling the ballroom and bouncing off the high ceiling and the polished chandeliers. Nathan felt it in his chest. He wasn't sure what to do with it. He took a step back. "Thank you," Lily said. "Thank you for asking." She looked at him for a long moment with those old, quick eyes. Something was turning over behind them that he couldn't read. Then she nodded and turned her chair and began making her way back toward the tables. Nathan turned toward the door and saw Evelyn Hart. She was standing at the edge of the dance floor, closer than he'd expected. She must have come from the table when Lily had disappeared, following her daughter through the crowd. She'd been watching the whole thing. She was watching it still, the last of it, watching Lily navigate her chair back through the parting crowd, and her face was open in a way that the earlier composed version of her face had not been. He had been around enough lost to know what it looked like from the outside, the particular expression of someone feeling something they thought they no longer had access to. He'd seen it on his own face in mirrors in the years after Renata died. The surprise of it, the involuntary nature of it. Evelyn's eyes were bright. She pressed her lips together once, quickly, and then the composure was mostly back, but mostly was not entirely, and Nathan could still see the edge of it. He meant to just walk past her. He didn't know why he stopped. She spoke first. I apologize. I don't know what I was going to say." She stopped. Tried again. "That was what you just did." "She asked me," Nathan said. "I said yes, that's all." Evelyn was still watching Lily, now back at the table, now reaching up for a glass of water, with the same straight-backed posture, but the smile still at the edge of her face. She hasn't done that voluntarily. Anything like that. In over a year. A pause, careful and measured, like she was deciding how much to say to a stranger. She lost it's a spinal injury, incomplete, from a car accident. She said the words with the flatness of someone who has said them enough times that the edges have worn down. She can feel sensation, but her mobility is limited. She used to dance, ballet. She was really something. Nathan didn't say anything. He wasn't sure anything was required. She wouldn't come to her last 2 birthday parties, Evelyn said. She wouldn't go to her friend Emma's recital. She said she was fine with everything, and then she would just not show up, not participate. A pause. "She came out here and found you herself. She said I moved nice." Evelyn blinked, and then, barely visible, like something surfacing from a great depth, she almost smiled. "That sounds like her. She also told me to stop counting out loud." He paused. She was right. I was counting out loud. The almost smile got slightly more like an actual smile. Nathan said, "She's a tough audience. She'll be okay." He didn't know why he said that. It wasn't something he could promise, but it came out with a certainty that surprised him, and Evelyn looked at him with an expression that was too complicated to name. He nodded and went back through the door. The shift ended at 11:15 because there was a post-event cleanup that ran over. He changed in the break room, turned in his equipment, clocked out. The night air outside the Meridian was cold with the first real edge of autumn, the kind of cold that meant the season was done pretending. He took the bus home. He always took the bus on late shifts. Driving tired made him nervous, and he'd learned a long time ago to be honest about his own limits. Mrs. Delgado was awake when he got home. She was usually awake, She was one of those people who slept 4 hours and considered anything more a personality failure, and Marcus was, against all instructions, also awake, draped horizontally across the couch with his head in Mrs. Delgado's lap and his feet over the armrest, watching television with the solemn focus of a child who had been bargaining to stay up for at least an hour and was not going to waste it. "You were supposed to be asleep at 9, Nathan said. "I slept for a little," Marcus said. "That's not—" "He was worried," Mrs. Delgado said serenely. She was eating crackers from a sleeve, which she did not offer to share, which was fine. "He wanted to make sure you came home." Marcus did not comment on this. He shifted slightly and pressed more firmly into the couch cushion, which was his version of dignified silence. Nathan sat down beside him. Marcus rearranged himself without waking up more than he needed to, relocating his head from Mrs. Delgado's lap to Nathan's arm, and Nathan sat there in the low light of the television while Mrs. Delgado gathered her things and let herself out with a small nod. "Dad?" Marcus said. His voice was blurred at the edges with sleep. "Yeah." "Were there famous people tonight?" "A few." "Did you see them?" "One or two." He thought about dark green silk and a face that was trying very hard to maintain its composure. "Sort of." "Were they nice?" Nathan thought about Lily and her white gloves and her chin up and the way she'd said 1, 2, 3, like she already knew the answer. He thought about Evelyn Hart at the edge of the dance floor with her bright eyes and the almost smile. "One of them was," he said. Marcus made a sound that meant he was satisfied and going back to sleep. Nathan left the television on at low volume and sat with his son's weight against him in the blue-gray light and let himself breathe for a minute. Just breathe, just be still. He thought about dancing. He thought about how long it had been since his body had remembered that it knew how to do something like that. Something that wasn't work, wasn't maintenance, wasn't getting from one point to another, how it had come back automatically without him deciding to let it. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. Unknown number. He stared at it for a moment. Late-night unknown numbers were never good things in his experience. He picked up anyway. "Mr. Cole." A woman's voice, professional, clipped. "My name is Patricia Wayne. I'm the executive assistant to Evelyn Hart. I apologize for the hour. She asked me to reach you tonight if possible." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "How did you get this number?" "Ms. Hart has resources available to her," Patricia said, which was not exactly an answer. "She wants me to convey that she'd like to meet with you tomorrow, at your convenience, to discuss something related to this evening. She said to tell you," a brief pause like she was reading from a note. "It's about Lily." Nathan looked at his sleeping son, at the familiar walls of the apartment, the faint water stain on the ceiling above the window that he kept meaning to deal with, the stack of library books on the end table that Marcus had been ignoring in favor of video games. "What time?" he said. "Whenever works for you. She'll make herself available." He thought about the way Evelyn had said she used to dance, flat words covering something that wasn't flat at all. He thought about the 1.5 years of a child not going to birthday parties, not stepping onto a dance floor, not letting herself want things that hurt too much to want. 9:30, he said. "I can do 9:30. "I'll confirm the address," Patricia said. "Good night, Mr. Cole." She hung up. Nathan set the phone down. Marcus stirred slightly in his sleep, shifted, pressed his face harder into Nathan's arm the way he did when he was deep under. "I've got you," Nathan said quietly. It was something he said sometimes, not because Marcus could hear it, just because it was true, and it helped to say true things out loud occasionally. The television played its late-night murmur. Nathan sat with it for a long time. The address Patricia had given him was in the Aldgate Financial District, on the 22nd floor of a building with a lobby that had a fountain in it. Not a small fountain, a real one, floor-to-ceiling stone, water running continuously down a curved wall into a shallow basin. Nathan stood in front of it for a moment before the security desk, not because he was impressed exactly, but because he was trying to decide what kind of person put a fountain in an office lobby and what that said about their relationship to other people. He signed in at the desk. The security guard gave him a visitor badge and directed him to the elevators. He rode up in silence, watching his own reflection in the polished elevator doors. Work clothes, because he'd decided the night before that he wasn't going to perform anything, wasn't going to borrow a nicer jacket, or show up looking like someone's idea of a job applicant. He looked like what he was. That was going to have to be enough. Patricia met him in the reception area on 22. She was exactly as he remembered her from the gala. Efficient, composed, the kind of woman who had probably never been late to anything in her adult life. She shook his hand and told him Miss Hart was finishing a call and would be with him shortly, and directed him to a seating area near a window that looked out over the city. He sat. He counted the minutes. 11. He was not annoyed by the wait, or not very annoyed. He understood that people like Evelyn Hart ran on schedules that were always overcommitted, that 11 minutes was probably considered prompt by the standards of her day. He used the time to look at the office through the glass walls, the open floor plan, the desks, the people moving between them with the particular kind of focused energy that expensive companies generated. Young people, mostly, in good clothes, with the expressions of people who believed the work they were doing mattered. The door to the inner office opened and Evelyn came out. She looked different in the daylight, not less polished. She was extremely polished, in a dark blazer and slacks, hair down today, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, but more human somehow, more tired, in a way the evening's formal event lighting had smoothed over. There were faint circles under her eyes. She'd been up late or up early, possibly both. She shook his hand. "Thank you for coming, and for the short notice. You said it was about Lily." "It is." She gestured toward the office. "Come in." He sat across from her at a desk that was large and mostly clear, except for a laptop, a coffee mug that looked like it had been refilled multiple times, and a framed photograph facing her that he could see from his angle. Lily, younger, in a dance recital costume, pink and white, tiara slightly crooked, mid-leap, arms overhead, both feet off the ground. The expression on her face in the photograph was so unguarded, so completely joyful, that it was almost difficult to look at directly. Evelyn sat, put her hands flat on the desk, and got to it. "I had you looked into last night," she said. Nathan met her eyes. "I figured. I know how that sounds." "It sounds like what it is," he said. "You're a mother and a stranger got close to your kid. I'd have done the same thing." Something in her shoulders dropped slightly, like she'd been prepared for a different response. "Okay, well..." She pulled her laptop toward her, glanced at it, then looked back at him. "You attended Westbrook Community College for 2 years before transferring to Pacific State University. Movement therapy program. Focus on pediatric motor rehabilitation and adaptive movement for children with physical disabilities. You were a junior when you withdrew, 3 semesters from finishing your degree." Nathan kept his face even. "That's right. Your son was born the year you left, and your wife..." She paused. Brief, but there. "Passed away when he was 2. "Renata," Nathan said. "Her name was Renata." "I'm sorry." And she meant it, he could tell. She said it simply, without the over-careful tone people sometimes used around loss. "I wasn't going to. I just wanted to understand who you were before I asked you something." "Then ask it." She closed the laptop, leaned back slightly in her chair. "What you did last night, that wasn't just a nice gesture. You know how to work with kids like Lily. The way you adjusted your movement to match hers, the way you kept her in the rhythm, the way you let her set the pace. That's training. That's specific knowledge." She paused. "I watched the video 3 times this morning." "There's a video?" "Several." She watched his face. "Someone posted one around midnight. It had 200,000 views by 7 a.m. Another pause, shorter. "It's at about 800,000 now." Nathan sat with that for a moment. 800,000 people had watched him push a ballroom door open with his shoulder and dance with a little girl. He was not sure how he felt about that. He filed it away to feel something about later. "Lily hasn't voluntarily participated in any physical activity since her accident," Evelyn said. 18 months. We've had 3 different physical therapists, all excellent, all credentialed, all completely unable to get through to her. She does the minimum she has to do for her medical appointments, and then she closes off. She picked up the coffee mug, held it, set it down without drinking. Last night she rolled herself through a crowd of strangers at a formal event and found you. A pause. She doesn't do things like that. She hasn't done things like that in a very long time. She saw an opening, Nathan said. She took it. That was her. I know it was her. I'm not saying you performed a miracle. I'm saying she responded to something about you that she hasn't responded to in anyone else. Evelyn looked at him directly. I want to hire you. Full-time or whatever schedule works around your son. Salary? She named a number that was almost twice what he made annually between his two jobs. Benefits, flexible hours, direct coordination with her medical team. You'd work with Lily specifically, structured sessions, progress tracking. No, Nathan said. The word landed quietly. Evelyn stopped mid-sentence. No? She said it like someone repeating a word in a language they were fairly confident they spoke correctly, but were suddenly unsure about. I appreciate what you're trying to do, Nathan said. I can see that you love her and you're trying to help her, and I'm not saying you're wrong to try. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But you can't hire me to care about your daughter. The reason she came to me last night, whatever she saw, it wasn't because I was her therapist. It wasn't because I was being paid to be kind to her. It was because I was just a person with a mop, doing his job, not treating her like a problem to solve. He stopped. If you put me on your payroll to work with her, I become another adult in her life who's there because they're supposed to be there, and she's smart enough to know the difference. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. The room was quiet. The thick-walled quiet of expensive buildings, all the street noise absorbed before it could reach the 22nd floor. So you're saying you won't help her, she said. Her voice was carefully controlled. I'm saying I won't help her that way. He sat up. I run a movement program at the Eastside Community Center. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, 3 to 5. It's free. It's not therapy. It's not clinical. It's kids moving together, all ages, all abilities. I've got 8 kids right now. Some with mobility limitations, some without. We do basic rhythm, some partner work, some group stuff. It's informal. He paused. If Lily wanted to come, she'd be welcome. As a participant, same as everyone else. Evelyn looked at him steadily. You're turning down a significant salary to offer my daughter a free community program. I'm turning down a job that would change what I am to her. He met her eyes. The community program doesn't change that. She'd be there because she wanted to be, not because you arranged it. A long silence. Evelyn picked up the coffee mug again, and this time she drank from it, and Nathan got the sense it was less about needing the coffee and more about needing something to do with her hands while she was thinking. I'd need to talk to her, Evelyn said finally, and I'd need to know more about the program, the facility, the other participants, the safety considerations given her. That's completely reasonable, Nathan said. Come see it. Bring her. Or come without her first if you want to check it out. Either way. Another silence. Then Evelyn said, She's going to want to go. If I tell her about it, she's going to want to go. Okay. I'm not sure if that's... She hasn't been around other children much. Since the accident, she's been home tutored for the past year and she doesn't... She stopped. She's built some walls. Most people her age have, Nathan said. Mine included. Evelyn looked at him. A slightly different kind of look. Not the assessing CEO look, not the careful mother look. Something more simply curious. How old is your son? 7, Marcus. Does he come to the program? He does the Thursday sessions. He's not particularly gifted at it. He has 2 left feet, and he knows it, and he does not care, which is honestly the right attitude. Nathan paused. He would probably talk Lily's ear off. Fair warning. Something changed in Evelyn's face. The professional composure slipped a fraction, and underneath it was something Nathan hadn't expected. A kind of exhausted, genuine relief, so small she might not have known it showed. I'll talk to her today, she said. Utem. He didn't tell anyone about the meeting. He went back to work. Afternoon shift, a downtown office building, 6 floors of carpet vacuuming and bathroom maintenance. And he kept it quiet inside him, the way he kept most things. He'd learned early that talking about things before they happened was a way of spending emotional energy he didn't have a surplus of. He thought about Lily's photograph. Mid-leap, tiara crooked, both feet off the ground. He thought about the expression on Evelyn's face when she said she used to dance. That evening, Marcus wanted to know what the fancy building had been about, because he'd overheard Nathan on the phone the night before, and Marcus missed nothing and forgot nothing, a quality Nathan simultaneously admired and found exhausting. "Work thing," Nathan said. "What kind of work thing?" "The gala last night. Someone wanted to follow up." Marcus considered this while eating his pasta, Tuesday pasta, as always, with the focused deliberateness of a child who takes food seriously. "Patricia texted you again this morning," he said. "I saw it." Nathan looked up from his plate. "You saw it." "The phone was on the counter." The phone was face down on the counter. Marcus appeared to have no response to this. He ate another forkful of pasta. "Marcus, I didn't read it. I just saw it was Patricia." He paused. "Who's Patricia?" "Someone's assistant." "Whose?" Nathan put his fork down. "A woman named Evelyn Hart. She has a daughter named Lily. Lily came to the gala last night and we danced. Somebody filmed it. Now I might have a new thing on Thursdays at the community center." Marcus processed this the way he processed most information, slowly, thoroughly, without visible reaction. Then he said, "How old is she?" 10. "Does she go to school?" "Home tutored right now." "Why?" "She was in an accident. She uses a wheelchair." Marcus chewed, thought. "Is she nice?" Nathan picked up his fork again. "She told me I needed to stop counting out loud." Marcus looked at him with an expression of complete understanding. "You count out loud when you're nervous." "I'm aware." "You do it when you're driving in traffic too, and when you're trying to fix things." He considered. "And sometimes when you're making phone calls." "Thank you, Marcus. I'm just saying." He returned to his pasta. "She sounds observant." "She is," Nathan said. They ate in comfortable quiet for a while. The kitchen window was cracked and the night air came in cool and smelling of the neighborhood. Exhaust and leaves and someone a few buildings over cooking something with garlic. Normal smells. The smells of an ordinary evening. "Dad," Marcus said. "Yeah." "Is the new thing good?" Nathan thought about it. "I don't know yet. Maybe." Marcus seemed to find this acceptable. He helped clear the plates without being asked. He did that sometimes, unpredictably, the way kids oscillated between helpfulness and total absence of it, and then went to do his homework at the kitchen table while Nathan washed up. Nathan stood at the sink with his hands in the warm water and looked out the window at the narrow strip of sky visible between the buildings. Blue-gray now, the last of the day going out of it. Maybe it was more than he'd had yesterday. He decided that was enough for now. Patricia called the next morning. Lily wanted to come to the community center. She hadn't decided, Patricia relayed, after hearing Evelyn explain it as a structured program with trained supervision and carefully managed Ms. Hart's words, Patricia added, in a tone that suggested Patricia herself had some feelings about those words. She hadn't decided based on any of that. What she'd decided based on was that Nathan had a son named Marcus with 2 left feet who didn't care, and she wanted to see that. "She said to tell you," Patricia continued in the same careful, this is not my message tone, "that she also wants to hear you count out loud again." Nathan laughed. He was in his car eating the turkey sandwich, and he laughed loud enough that a woman walking past the window looked over. "Thursday," he said. 3 o'clock. Tell her to wear something she can move in. She says she knows what to wear to a dance program. Of course she does. The Eastside Community Center was not a beautiful building. This was simply a fact, not an apology. It was a converted gymnasium in a neighborhood that had been economically struggling for decades, with water-stained ceiling tiles and fluorescent lights that buzzed slightly, and a sprung wood floor that had seen better decades. The equipment Nathan had accumulated for the program lived in a rolling cart in the storage closet. A Bluetooth speaker, a handful of resistance bands, some foam mats, a set of rhythm sticks that had come from a school district donation and were slightly mismatched in length. He'd been running the program for 14 months. It had started with 3 kids, 2 from the neighborhood whose parents had asked if their children could come watch, when Nathan ran his solo practice sessions, and Marcus, who had come by default because Nathan had nowhere to leave him. Now it was 8. Word spread through the kind of informal networks that existed in communities where people actually knew their neighbors. the woman at the laundromat who'd mentioned it to her sister, the pediatric nurse at the local clinic who'd told two families about it. Nathan hadn't advertised. He didn't know how to advertise. He just kept showing up on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the kids kept coming. He arrived early on Thursday to set up. The other kids filtered in between 2:40 and 3. Deshawn, age 9, who had a prosthetic left leg below the knee and moved with a loping energy that Nathan had spent 6 months trying to channel rather than correct. The Okafor twins, Adeze and Chukwu, age 8, who were not in any way mobility limited, but had been brought by their grandmother who thought they needed something to do with their bodies besides run into walls. Priya, age 11, who had cerebral palsy affecting her right side and who was, in Nathan's opinion, the most naturally musical person in the room, child or adult. Small, solemn Felix, age 6, whose parents had brought him after a speech therapist had suggested rhythm-based movement might help him. Keziah, age 10, who had moderate hearing loss and worked with Nathan on feeling music through vibration and visual cues. And Tomas, age 12, oldest in the group, who had Down syndrome and who had been coming since the first month, and who greeted Nathan every session by saying, "Mr. Nathan, you're here," with exactly the same volume and enthusiasm as if Nathan showing up was a surprise and a gift every single time. Marcus arrived at 2:55, school bag still on his back, and immediately asked if there was going to be snack. "After?" Nathan said. "What kind of snack?" "The kind you get after you participate without complaining." Marcus dropped his bag against the wall and began untying his shoes with the expression of someone accepting a reasonable but disappointing deal. At 3:07, which Nathan noted because Patricia had specifically said 3 o'clock, and Patricia seemed like someone to whom 3 o'clock meant 3 o'clock, the gym door opened and Lily came in. She'd come in a chair Nathan hadn't seen before, lighter than the one from the gala, more maneuverable, the kind designed for active use. She was wearing leggings and a long-sleeved shirt, and her hair was in a ponytail. No white gloves. She looked around the gym with those quick, dark eyes, taking everything in. The other kids, the space, the equipment, Nathan. Evelyn was behind her, also in more casual clothes, which was the right call. Though Nathan noticed she'd still managed to make them look deliberate. Dark jeans, a simple fitted top, a jacket. She looked around the gym with a different kind of attention than her daughter, more evaluative, more watchful. She met Nathan's eyes across the space and gave a small professional nod. He nodded back. Lily had already started moving toward the other kids. Deshawn noticed her first. Deshawn noticed everything. He had the hypervigilance of a kid who'd spent years being noticed himself and had turned it into a kind of social radar. He rolled up onto the balls of his feet, his habit, a counterbalance for the prosthetic, and said, "Hey, you new?" "Yeah," Lily said. "I'm Deshawn." He looked at the wheelchair with the frank assessment of a child who had no reason to be weird about mobility devices. "What happened to you?" "Deshawn," Nathan said, not harshly. "What? I'm just asking." "Car accident," Lily said. She said it the same way her mother said it. Flat, practiced, the edges worn down from repetition. But she was looking at Deshawn with open interest. "What happened to your leg?" "Bone cancer," Deshawn said. "When I was 6. They took the leg, but they got it all, so." He shrugged, a big kid shrug that managed to contain both weight and lightness simultaneously. "Now I'm the fastest one here." "He is," Marcus confirmed from across the room. "It's extremely annoying." "Nobody asked you, Marcus," Deshawn said without heat. Marcus appeared unconcerned. He made his way over to Lily's chair with the slightly overconfident social approach of a child who had decided, without any supporting evidence, that he would be liked. "I'm Marcus. Mr. Nathan's my dad." "Are you Lily?" Lily looked at him. "How did you know?" "Dad said you were coming." He pointed at Nathan. "He said you have good posture, and 2 left feet isn't the worst thing in the world, which I think was about me." "It was about you," Nathan said. "Yeah." Marcus considered this without apparent injury. To Lily, he said, "Is it true you told him to stop counting out loud?" Lily looked at Nathan. A small gleam appeared in her eye. "He was counting under his breath during the waltz." "He does that all the time," Marcus said, with the satisfaction of someone whose personal experience has just been independently verified. He counts when he's nervous. Also in traffic. Also when he's trying to fix. Okay, Nathan said. We're going to start in 5 minutes, so if everybody could find some floor space. He doesn't like us talking about the counting, Marcus told Lily, at a volume that was clearly audible to Nathan. I can tell, Lily said. She was almost smiling. Not quite, but the almost was bigger than it had been. The first session was not magical. Nathan had learned long ago to be suspicious of magical. Magical was usually the story you told afterward, not the thing as it was actually happening. The thing as it was actually happening was Deshawn almost knocking over Adeze during a rhythm exercise, Felix crying briefly because he dropped his rhythm sticks and the sound startled him, Tomas wanting to do the same sequence 11 times in a row because he liked it and being genuinely confused about why 11 times was too many. What the first session was, actually, was normal, which was its own kind of thing. Nathan ran the warm-up as he always did, breathing first, then slow movement, arms and shoulders, and the gentle rotation of the upper body that he'd adapted from work he'd done in his unfinished degree, designed to be accessible for every body in the room. He kept an eye on Lily through the warm-up. She hung back slightly, doing the arm movements with the careful attention of someone taking notes, watching the other kids with those quick eyes. Not fully in it yet, but watching. Evelyn had taken a seat along the wall. Nathan had deliberately not looked at her directly for the first 20 minutes, partly because he needed to focus on the group, and partly because he had the distinct impression that being watched by Evelyn Hart at full attention was the kind of thing that made people self-conscious, and he couldn't afford to be self-conscious right now. When he glanced over at the 30-minute mark, she was leaning forward with her elbows on her knees, watching Lily. Lily had moved. Not physically. She was still in her chair, but she'd moved in some less visible way, crossed some internal threshold between observation and participation. She was doing the rhythm sequence with both arms now, full extension, and she was watching Nathan's cues and her mouth was moving slightly. Counting, he realized. She was counting under her breath. He did not comment on it. He looked away before she could see him noticing. At the 45-minute mark, he transitioned the group into the partner section, and he watched the kids sort themselves out the way they always did. Deshawn gravitating toward Tomas because they'd been partners for months and worked well together, the Okafor twins immediately pairing with each other despite Nathan's standing request that they branch out. Felix ending up with Priya because Priya was patient and Felix needed patient. That left Kezia and Marcus, which also left Lily. Marcus looked at the math, looked at Lily, looked at Nathan with the expression of a child who was about to do something he hadn't been asked to do and wanted credit for it in advance. Hey, Lily, he said, do you want to be partners? Lily looked at Marcus, then at the other pairs, already moving, then back at Marcus. You said you have 2 left feet, she said. I do. How bad is it? Mr. Nathan says I have natural enthusiasm that occasionally gets in the way of timing. Lily appeared to consider the diplomatic phrasing. That's a nice way of saying bad. Yeah. Marcus appeared entirely at peace with this assessment. But I'm good at counting. I can count out loud if that helps. A beat. And then Lily laughed. Short, surprised, the same laugh Nathan had heard in the hotel ballroom, the same quality of genuine involuntary surprise. She covered her mouth with one hand like she hadn't meant to let it out. Then she dropped the hand and the laugh was still there at the edges. Okay, she said. Partners. Nathan watched them from across the room and felt something in the region of his sternum that he didn't immediately have a word for. 40 minutes later, when the session ended and the kids were getting water and putting on shoes, Evelyn appeared at his elbow. He hadn't heard her cross the room. She moved quietly for someone who commanded that much space. She laughed, Evelyn said. Her voice was low enough that it was just for him. I heard. She hasn't... She stopped, pressed her lips together in that way he was beginning to recognize as her version of composure maintenance. It's been a while. Nathan didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say that wouldn't be either obvious or insufficient. I owe you an apology, Evelyn said. He looked at her. She kept her eyes on Lily, who was now listening to Marcus explain something with his characteristic too much volume. What I offered you the other day. The position, the salary. I was trying to solve a problem with resources, because that's what I know how to do. You don't have to apologize for that. I think I do. She turned to look at him then, and her face was doing that thing again. The professional composure present but thin, something else visible at the edges. You were right. If she thought you were there because I was paying you to be... She shook her head. She would have seen through it in about 30 seconds. Probably less, Nathan said honestly. Evelyn made a sound that was almost a laugh. She gets that from me, unfortunately. He believed that. He said so. They stood side by side for a moment, watching the kids. Deshaun was demonstrating something for Tomas at high speed. The Okafor twins were arguing about something in the low-stakes way siblings argued when they weren't actually angry. Felix was carefully putting each rhythm stick back into the bag individually, very slowly, very precisely. I'd like her to keep coming, Evelyn said, if that's still the offer. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 3 o'clock. He paused. She should know it runs on donations, so if she wants to bring snack for the group sometime, the kids would appreciate it. Marcus would appreciate it loudly and repeatedly. Evelyn glanced at him sideways. Is that your version of a fee? It's my version of making her part of the community instead of a guest in it. A pause. Then Evelyn said, Tuesday. Tuesday, Nathan agreed. Across the room, Marcus was now attempting to teach Lily a sequence that Nathan was fairly sure he'd invented on the spot, with his characteristic mixture of confidence and technical inaccuracy. Lily was watching his feet with the focused, critical attention of someone who knew what correct looked like, and was making careful note of how far this was from it. She wasn't smiling anymore, but she was entirely, completely present. Nathan thought that might actually be better. The Tuesdays and Thursdays accumulated. It wasn't a dramatic progression. This was real life, not a movie. There was no single moment where everything clicked, no session where Lily suddenly became a different person. It was slower and more irregular than that. There were good sessions and flat sessions, and one particularly rough Thursday in November when Lily arrived already upset about something that had happened at home and snapped at Marcus in a way that wasn't fair, and then went very quiet and tight for the rest of the session and left without saying goodbye. Nathan sent Evelyn a brief text that evening. She had a hard day. Happens. She'll be okay. Evelyn's response came 40 minutes later. She cried in the car on the way home. She said she was fine. I know she wasn't. Nathan stared at the text for a moment. Then he wrote, She knows you know. That's the first step. 3 dots appeared and disappeared twice before Evelyn responded. When did you get wise? He snorted at his phone. I'm not wise. I have a 7-year-old who lies about brushing his teeth. I've just gotten used to knowing when someone's telling me they're fine because they're not ready to say they're not. A pause. Then, that's actually wise, Nathan. He read his name in her text and noted, very precisely, and without doing anything about it, that something in him noticed it. Just his name, typed out by her. He wasn't sure what to do with that observation, so he put his phone down and went to check whether Marcus had actually brushed his teeth, which he had not. By December, Lily was arriving early. Not dramatically early, 5-7 minutes, but early enough that Nathan noticed. She would position herself near the equipment cart and help him distribute the rhythm sticks and the mats without being asked, with the focused efficiency of someone who was deciding to belong somewhere and going about it practically. She'd also started talking to the other kids, not just Marcus, to Kazia, who had taught her the hand signal for too loud and good job, and your turn that they used during sessions when Kazia couldn't rely on audio cues. To Priya, who was quiet and sharp, and had decided after about 3 sessions that Lily was worth talking to, which from Priya was not a small thing. Even to Tomas, who had greeted Lily on her second session by saying, Lily, you came back, with the same volume and joy he used for Nathan, which had visibly startled Lily and then, after a moment, clearly and genuinely moved her. Nathan watched all of this from the margins, the way he watched most things, without drawing attention to himself watching, without narrating it or commenting on it, letting it happen at its own pace. What he noticed over those weeks was that Lily's chair moved differently in the gym than it did everywhere else. It wasn't a physical thing. The chair was the same chair. It was the quality of her movement in it, the particular ease that came into her body when she crossed the threshold of the community center gym. Elsewhere, at the gala, in Evelyn's office when she'd come to pick Lily up once and Nathan had briefly been there, she held herself in the careful way of someone managing how they were perceived. In the gym, she just moved, just was. He also noticed that Evelyn sat less rigidly at the wall as the weeks went on. In the first few sessions, she'd had a phone in her hand, discreetly angled down, not obviously working, but there. By week 4, the phone was in her bag. By week 6, she was watching the sessions with the full, unguarded attention she'd probably given to presentations and board meetings in the years before she'd learned to be careful about being seen to want things. She hadn't made any moves to convert the arrangement back into a business relationship. She hadn't offered the salary again, hadn't tried to frame it in any official capacity. She'd thanked him, twice, in the parking lot after sessions, in the careful way of someone who was trying not to overdo a thing but felt it needed to be said. The second time, he'd said, "Stop thanking me. She does the work. I just show up." Evelyn had looked at him with an expression he couldn't fully read, something between appreciation and something more complicated. "You keep doing that," she said. "Doing what? Giving the credit away?" He thought about that. "It's where the credit belongs." "Maybe." She opened her car door, glanced back at him. "But you could take a little." He didn't have a response to that. She drove away and he stood in the parking lot in the December cold for a moment before getting into his own car. He thought about her saying maybe the way she'd said it, not dismissively, not conceding, like she was genuinely thinking about it, like she'd found it interesting. He drove home in the dark, past the lights of the city, and did not count out loud the whole way, which was an improvement. It was Priya who noticed it first, because Priya noticed most things that mattered. It was a Thursday in late December, the last session before the holiday break, and Nathan had let the structure loosen a little. Holiday energy, sugar from the plate of cookies Evelyn had sent with Lily for the group, the particular looseness of kids who knew vacation was imminent. He'd put on music and let them move freely for the last 20 minutes, which he did occasionally when he wanted to see what they chose when no one was directing them. Lily had wheeled to the center of the floor. She did this sometimes during free movement. It had started around week 5, this willingness to occupy the center of the space rather than the edges. She was moving her upper body to the music, arms and shoulders, and the rotation of her torso, eyes half closed, clearly somewhere inside the rhythm, rather than observing it from outside. Priya, who had drifted close, watched her for a moment and then said quietly, "Your arms are different." Lily opened her eyes. "What?" "From when you first came." Priya tilted her head. Her right side was slightly held, always, the cerebral palsy showing most in stillness. In motion, she was more fluid. "They were careful before. Like you were checking them." She paused, looking for words. "Now they're just yours." Lily looked at her arms, then at Priya. "Yeah," she said after a moment. "I know." Nathan, nearby, heard this and looked at his hands and found something urgent to do with them, so no one would see his face. Across the room, Evelyn had gone very still in her chair against the wall. She'd heard it too. Nathan knew without looking. He put the music back up. The session went on. Outside, the city's December wind pressed at the old gym windows and found the gaps in the weather seal, and the fluorescent lights buzzed their perpetual buzz, and 8 kids moved together on a second-hand wood floor, and Nathan thought about Lily's arms. Yours, just yours. And about what it cost a person to get from careful to that, and how long it took, and how the only way to get there was one Tuesday and Thursday at a time, showing up and not being stopped by the distance between where you started and where you wanted to go. The cookies were gone. Marcus had eaten 3.5 and was pretending he'd only had 2. Tomas was dancing to something only he could hear, separate from the music Nathan had on, in perfect contentment. Deshawn and Lily were in an argument about something involving rhythm sticks that seemed likely to resolve in their favor. Nathan stood in the middle of it and let himself feel, for a moment, the specific weight of a life that was still hard, in most of the ways it had always been hard. The rent, the exhaustion, the gap where Renata used to be, the half-finished degree that sometimes felt like an accusation. but that was also undeniably, unmistakably carrying something good inside it now. He didn't name it. He just let it be there. The video had been online for 6 weeks before anyone with real reach found it. That was how these things worked. Nathan understood this in retrospect, though he hadn't been paying attention to it at the time. Something could sit at 200,000 or 300,000 views for weeks, circulating in its particular corner of the internet, passed between people who found it meaningful without it ever breaking into the wider current. Then one person with the right kind of platform shared it, and the wider current took it, and there was nothing to do after that but watch where it went. The person who shared it was a sports broadcaster named Caleb Osei, who had 11 million followers and a reputation for posting things that were, as he put it in his caption, not sports, but still about heart. He posted the Meridian Ballroom video on a Tuesday evening in early January with the caption, "This man said yes. That's all. Watch it." And 11 million people, plus the people they shared it to, watched it. Nathan found out the way he found out about most things that weren't directly in front of him, late, and from Marcus. Marcus had been shown the video at school by a classmate who had been shown it by an older sibling. He came home on Wednesday afternoon and put his backpack down and said, "Dad, you're famous," with a tone that suggested he was not entirely sure how he felt about this. Nathan was making dinner. He turned around. "What?" "Jordan showed me at lunch. There's a video of you dancing with that girl at the hotel." Marcus climbed onto the kitchen stool and pulled out Nathan's phone from where it had been sitting on the counter and held it up. "There's like 30 million views." Nathan took the phone, looked at the number, put the phone back down and turned back to the stove. "Okay," he said. "That's all you're going to say?" "What do you want me to say?" Marcus appeared to find this insufficient. "Jordan said you might be on the news." "Probably not." "His mom said you might be on the news." Nathan stirred the pot on the stove. It was soup, a simple chicken vegetable thing he made from scratch because it was cheaper than canned, and he had time on weeknights. The kitchen smelled like it. Normal smell. Good smell. People see things on the internet all the time, Marcus. In 2 weeks, they'll be looking at something else. Jordan's mom said, Jordan's mom doesn't know what she's talking about. He said it without heat, just factually. Eat a snack if you're hungry. Dinner's in 40 minutes. He did not look at the video. He knew what was in it. He'd been there. He had a fairly clear memory of it, and watching himself on a screen was not something he had any desire to do. He also did not look at the comments, because he'd learned a long time ago that reading internet comments about yourself was the emotional equivalent of walking into a room and inviting everyone present to say whatever they were thinking directly to your face, and no reasonable person did that voluntarily. He was aware, distantly and increasingly, that the number kept climbing. Patricia texted to inform him on Thursday morning that Ms. Hart was aware, and that her communications team was managing the coverage on their end, and that he should feel free to reach out if he needed any guidance on media inquiries. He thanked her and put the phone in his pocket and went to clean 6 floors of downtown office space. The first interview request came to the Meridian Hotel, addressed to the janitor from the charity video, which Nathan found both impersonal and, in a dark way, funny. Dennis called him into the office about it with the uncomfortable expression of a man who had not signed up to manage media relations. "I don't know what to do with this," Dennis said, sliding a printed email across the desk. It was from a morning television program. "Throw it away," Nathan said. "They're asking about you specifically. They want a statement from the hotel." "Then tell them the hotel has no comment. I'm an employee. I worked a shift, that's all." Dennis rubbed the back of his neck. "Nathan, man, there's a lot of attention on this. The hotel's PR people are actually kind of excited about it. Good publicity for the Meridian," they said. Human interest angle. "I'm glad for them," Nathan said. "I'm still not doing an interview." He went back to work. The Tuesday session that week had a different texture to it from the moment Lily arrived. She came in with her jaw set in the particular way Nathan had learned to read as something happened, and I am managing it, and she went through the warm-up with her eyes down and her arms moving precisely, but with none of the looseness she'd developed over the past months. Marcus, who had the social sensitivity of a fruit bat when it came to most things, but had developed over their Tuesday and Thursday hours together an oddly accurate antenna for Lily's states, caught Nathan's eye from across the room and did a small eyebrow raise that meant, "What's wrong with her?" Nathan gave a small head shake that meant, "Leave it." He ran the session close to normal, made space, kept the energy low. Afterward, when the other kids were getting their things, Lily stayed on the floor near the equipment cart without making moves to go. Nathan began putting things away around her, not pushing, not asking. After a while, she said, "People are saying things about my mom." Nate, he kept coiling the resistance bands. "What kind of things?" "Online comments and stuff." She was looking at her wheels. "Some people are saying she set it up, like as a publicity stunt, that she had someone arrange for you to be there and told me to go find you." A pause. "Some people are saying she's using me." Nathan didn't respond immediately. He put the resistance bands in the cart, moved to the foam mats, started stacking them. "Do you believe that?" he asked. Lily looked up. "No." "Does your mom know you saw the comments?" "No. She doesn't know I go on those threads. She'd take my tablet away." "She'd probably be right to." He said it without judgment. "Looking at what strangers say about your family online is bad for me." "I know." She pulled her gloves, but she'd started wearing fingerless workout gloves to sessions, practical and slightly battered from use, on and off her hands, a nervous gesture. "But they're also saying things about you." He stopped with a mat in his hands. "What kind of things?" "That you did it for money, that you knew who she was and you saw an opportunity." Her voice was careful and tight. "One person said you probably have a lawyer already." Nathan set the mat down. He sat on the edge of the stack at Lily's level and looked at her directly. "Do you believe that?" She met his eyes. "No, obviously not." "Okay, but..." She stopped, pulled the glove back on. "It makes me feel bad, that people say it, even if it's not true." She was quiet for a moment. "I don't want to be why your life gets harder." Nathan was quiet for a beat, letting that sit. Then he said, "Lily, look at me." She did. "My life was already hard. You didn't make it hard. And you're not making it harder. You're one of the good parts of it. You and the other kids in this gym." He kept his voice even because she needed even right now, not emotional, not reassuring adult voice, just steady. "The people in the comments don't know you. They don't know me. They know 30 seconds of video from a hotel ballroom. That's all they have. The actual story is ours, and we know what it is." She held his gaze for a long moment. He could see her working through it, the part of her that had accepted what he said, and the part of her that was 10 years old and still stung by it. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, go find Marcus. He's been hovering near the door trying to look like he's not listening to us." From behind the half-open gym door, Marcus's voice, "I wasn't hovering." "He was hovering," Lily said, and for a moment, small, brief, the jaw loosened and she was just a kid again. The board meeting happened on a Thursday. Nathan didn't know about it when it happened. He found out the way most things reached him in this period. Sideways, later, incomplete. What he knew was that Evelyn missed the Thursday session, which she hadn't done before, and that Patricia texted him a brief apology note on Evelyn's behalf, scheduling conflict will be at Tuesday's session, and that there was something about the note's brevity that felt like it was leaving something out. What had actually happened, he learned later in pieces, was this. The Heart Capital Board of Directors had called an emergency meeting about what their communications director was calling the optics situation. 7 board members, the communications director, the head of legal, and Evelyn in a conference room on the 22nd floor. The meeting had run 2.5 hours. The communication director's concern, which several board members shared, was the story's frame. The viral video itself was fine, even positive. The problem was the follow-up coverage, which had discovered that Lily was regularly attending a free community program run by the man from the video, and that Evelyn was present at these sessions, and that a financial relationship had been offered and refused. The refusal angle was the one that worried them most. Someone had talked, not Nathan, not Evelyn, but someone in the chain, and the story that had emerged in 2 separate investigative-style blog posts was, why did Evelyn Hart's janitor refuse her money? The framing, the communications director explained to the board, invited speculation. It made the relationship look complicated in ways that were hard to manage. Was it a romance? Was it a political statement? Was Nathan Cole positioning himself for something? Was Heart Capital's CEO making personal decisions that could affect her professional standing? The head of legal had a more specific concern. Nathan had no formal agreement with Heart Capital, no NDA, no contractual relationship whatsoever. He was a private citizen who had significant access to Evelyn and her daughter and no legal obligation to manage that access carefully. The recommendation from the communications team, supported by 3 of the 7 board members, was that Evelyn should issue a warm but distancing statement, something that thanked the community, celebrated the program, and gently repositioned the ongoing relationship as concluded. A touching moment that inspired us. We wish everyone in that community well. Close the loop, move on, protect the brand. Nathan learned all of this later, in fragments, from Evelyn herself. What he knew at the time was simply that she missed Thursday. He ran the session without her. Lily came. She was quiet through most of it, quieter than she'd been in weeks, and Nathan didn't push. At the end, when the other kids were leaving, Lily stayed again. "Is my mom coming back?" she asked. She said it with the flat, careful voice she used when she was asking something she already suspected the answer to and was preparing herself. Nathan sat down across from her. "She had a work thing. She'll be at Tuesdays." "Work things don't usually make her miss." Lily was looking at the floor. "She missed the last one of these she went to before the accident, too. That's how I knew something was really wrong." He hadn't known that. He filed it away carefully as information that belonged to her. "Has something happened?" he asked. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Someone from her company called the house last night. I heard her on the phone for a long time after." She looked up at him. "She does this thing when she's stressed. She organizes. She stays up and reorganizes things that don't need to be reorganized. I heard her in the kitchen at 1 a.m. rearranging the pantry." Nathan said nothing. He thought about Evelyn at her desk, with her hands flat on the surface. The deliberate way she'd chosen where to put her coffee mug. The controlled precision of someone who needed order around her when things felt uncontrollable. "Did she tell you anything?" "She said everything was fine." Lily's voice held a particular dryness that she sometimes had, older than 10, the dryness of a child who had heard everything's fine enough times to know what it covered. "She said it the way you told me she would say it." Nathan remembered the text. "She knows you know. That's the first step." "Okay," he said. He wasn't sure what else to say. He didn't have information he could give her without overstepping something, without saying things about Evelyn's situation that weren't his to say. "Give her space to figure it out. She will." "How do you know?" He considered the honest answer. "Because I've watched her in this gym for 3 months. She's someone who figures things out." He paused. "She's also someone who tries to figure everything out alone and in order, and sometimes that takes longer than it needs to." Lily looked at him for a moment. "You pay a lot of attention to her." The observation landed with a precision that he hadn't expected from a 10-year-old, though by now he probably should have expected exactly this level of precision from this particular 10-year-old. He kept his face neutral. "I pay attention to everyone in this room," he said. Lily held his gaze for a moment with those dark, direct eyes, and did not say whatever she was thinking, which somehow made it worse. "Come on," he said, standing. "Marcus ate the last granola bar, and I need a witness when I confront him about it." The escalation happened fast, the way these things always did. The 2 blog posts became 4. A culture writer at a mid-sized online publication ran a piece titled "The Janitor Who Refused a Billionaire: What Nathan Cole's No Says About Class in America," which was thoughtful and somewhat fair, but which Nathan found, in the few paragraphs someone read to him over the phone, deeply uncomfortable in the way that having your life used as an example always felt uncomfortable, even when the example was being used kindly. Then a larger outlet picked up the story. Then a morning news program ran a segment without him. Just the video, an interview with a child psychologist who had never met Lily, and 2 commentators debating what the story meant. One of the commentators, a man with a very confident voice, said that Nathan Cole's refusal of the salary was either admirable or suspicious, and the fact that it was hard to tell which said something about the current state of trust in institutions. The other commentator, a woman who kept trying to redirect toward the child, said that regardless of the adult dynamics, The video showed something genuinely moving, and the focus should stay there. They didn't reach a conclusion. Nobody ever reached a conclusion on these segments, as far as Nathan could tell. They just generated heat. The comment sections, which Nathan was still mostly not reading, but which were summarized for him by people who were, including Marcus, who had apparently developed a morbid fascination with the whole thing, divided roughly into 3 camps. People who found the story moving and left it at that. People who were convinced Nathan had ulterior motives, ranging from wanting money to wanting media attention to wanting a relationship with Evelyn Hart. And a third group, smaller but persistent, who were convinced that Evelyn had orchestrated everything, that the whole dance had been staged, that Lily's wheelchair was either exaggerated or fabricated for sympathy. That last category made Nathan put his phone down and stare at the wall for a solid 5 minutes when Marcus relayed it to him. "Who thinks that?" he said. "A lot of people," Marcus said, with the philosophical resignation of a child who had been alive long enough to have some familiarity with how people were. "They think a 10-year-old faked a spinal injury. Some of them. Other ones think she's really hurt, but that her mom made her do the dance thing." Marcus looked at his father carefully. "Are you okay?" Nathan rubbed his face with both hands. "I'm fine. You sound like Lily's mom." He laughed despite himself. Short and slightly exhausted, but real. "I'm genuinely fine," he said. "I'm just annoyed." "That's better than fine." "Yeah." He dropped his hands. "Yeah, it is." The call from his building manager came the following week, a pleasant man named Doug, who was generally low maintenance as landlords went, but who had a particular quality in his voice when he called, a careful pleasantness that Nathan had learned to read as something being wrapped in pleasantness. "I just wanted to check in," Doug said, "given everything going on. Make sure you're doing okay." "I'm fine," Nathan said. "Nothing's changed on my end." Right. A pause. "I've had a couple of calls from people asking about you, asking about the building." Nathan went still. "What kind of people?" "Journalists, I think. A couple of them. And one person who, honestly, I'm not sure. They were asking if you had a lease agreement, how long you'd been a tenant, whether you'd ever been late on rent." Another pause, more uncomfortable. "I didn't tell them anything. You're a great tenant, Nathan. I just wanted you to know it was happening." "Thank you, Doug. I appreciate that." He hung up and sat on the edge of his bed and thought about people he had never met trying to find things to say about him. He thought about his lease, his work record, his bank account, his half-finished degree, his dead wife. The things that were simply the contents of his life, neutral and private, becoming material for a story he hadn't asked to be in. He picked the phone back up and called Dennis. Dennis answered on the second ring. "I know why you're calling," Dennis said. "How bad is it?" A sigh. "The hotel's been getting calls. Media requests mostly. A couple of weird ones from people claiming to be private investigators." A pause. "HR wants to talk to you, not in a you're in trouble way, in a we need to figure out how to handle this way. I'll come in tomorrow." "Nathan," Dennis's voice shifted. "You should know, the hotel actually came out ahead on this. Reservations are up. They're getting mentioned in every piece as the venue. They like the attention. That's good for them. Which means they're not going to do anything that might make you look bad. Just keep that in mind going in." "Okay." "Also," Dennis said, "there are flowers at the front desk for you. From a person who says she's your second-grade teacher." Nathan stared at the wall. "I don't have a second-grade teacher. She's been dead for 10 years. "Yeah," Dennis said. "That's what I figured. I'm going to throw them out." After he hung up, Nathan sat in the quiet of his apartment and tried to take stock of what was happening to his life in the way he always took stock of things, practically, without drama, looking at what was actually there. His job was secure. His apartment was secure. Marcus was fine, was actually finding the whole thing entertaining in a way that probably needed monitoring but wasn't currently harmful. The program at the community center was still running. Lily was still coming. Those were the actual contents of his life. The rest was weather. He went to bed at 10:30. He slept badly, but he slept. The call from Evelyn came on a Saturday morning earlier than she'd ever called before, 7:42. Nathan was making pancakes. He always made pancakes on Saturday, had done since Marcus was 4. It was one of those small rituals that had accumulated enough weight over the years to feel load-bearing. "I need to tell you something," she said. No preamble, no good morning. "I should have told you sooner, and I'm sorry I didn't." He turned the burner down. "Okay." She told him about the board meeting, all of it. The communications director's recommendation, the legal team's concerns, the 3 board members who had voted to support the distancing statement. She told it in the direct, factual way she told most things, without editorializing, but he could hear underneath it something that was doing a lot of work to stay controlled. When she was done, he said, "When did this happen?" "The Thursday I missed." "Why didn't you tell me then?" A pause. "Because I was still deciding what I was going to do about it." Another pause, shorter. "And because I didn't want you to think it was your problem to solve." Nathan leaned against the kitchen counter. Through the bedroom doorway, he could hear Marcus still asleep, the particular quality of deep morning sleep breathing that Marcus did on weekends when no alarm pulled him out of it. The pancake batter sat in its bowl. The kitchen light was the low sideways light of early morning. "What did you decide?" he asked. "I'm not issuing the statement." Her voice was flat with certainty. "I told the board on Friday. They're not happy." A beat. 3 of them are very not happy. Richard Hale, he's the longest-serving board member, told me I was making an emotional decision at the expense of fiduciary responsibility. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that my daughter laughed for the first time in over a year in a community center gym, and that if protecting the brand required me to end the thing that made that happen, then the brand could manage without my help for once." A pause. "I said it more professionally than that. But that's what you meant." "That's exactly what I meant." She exhaled slowly. "Nathan, I need you to know that whatever happens with the board, whatever they decide to do, however this plays out in the press, I am not going to let it affect what Lily has at that gym. That's not negotiable. I just needed you to hear me say it." He was quiet for a moment, looking at the batter in the bowl, at the morning light on the kitchen floor. "I appreciate that. I also need to tell you that I think things are about to get louder." Her voice shifted slightly, still steady, but with a different quality, something that wasn't quite apology and wasn't quite warning. It was closer to honesty. "The communications team thinks the story is going to get more personal. There's already a piece in draft somewhere. I have a source who told me that's going to focus on your background, your finances, your degree, Renata." Nathan went still. "Renata. I'm sorry. I know that's..." She stopped. "I know that's different." It was different. Everything else, his lease, his job record, his bank account, the half-finished degree, those were facts about his life that belonged to him but didn't reach down into anything vital. Renata was vital. Renata was the thing that had remade him from the inside out, her death, and the years before it, and the shape that her absence had taken in his life, and Marcus's life, the quiet presence of her everywhere in the way he raised their son, and what he'd kept of himself, and what he'd let go. The idea of a journalist with a deadline making her into a paragraph in a story about brand management made something go cold and hard in his chest. "Okay," he said. "Okay? I'm not going to fall apart about it. I'm just..." He pushed off the counter, turned the burner back up. The batter needed to go in, or it would get flat. "I'm okay." "Nathan," her voice was careful, "you don't have to perform being fine." He paused with the ladle in his hand. Something about the phrase, "you don't have to perform being fine," landed with unexpected precision. "Old habit," he said. "I know." A pause that was different from her professional pauses, less managed, more real. "I do it too." He poured the first pancake into the pan. The batter spread and hissed. He watched it and thought about what she'd said, and what he'd said, and the strange, particular intimacy of 2 people who were each very accustomed to holding things together alone, discovering that someone else on the other end of the phone understood that specific form of fatigue. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Same thing I've been doing. Work my shifts, run the program, take care of Marcus. He watched the pancake bubble at the edges. Weather the weather. A pause. Then Evelyn said, "That's either very zen or very stubborn." "Probably stubborn." He flipped the pancake. "What about you?" "Same, but with more legal consultation. A beat, and probably less sleep." "Evelyn?" He said her name, which he didn't do often, and she went quiet in a particular way. "You made the right call. With the board." A long pause. When she spoke, her voice was not different exactly, but more directly itself, less managed around the edges. "Yeah." Quiet. "I think so too." Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair sideways from sleep, wearing one sock for reasons Nathan chose not to examine. He looked at his father on the phone with the bleary assessment of a 7-year-old before full consciousness had arrived. "Is that pancakes?" he said, at full volume. Nathan moved the phone away from his mouth. "Yes." "Give me 5 minutes." "Who are you talking to?" "Evelyn." Marcus appeared to accept this without particular surprise. He shuffled to the kitchen table and sat down and put his chin in his hands with the patience of someone willing to wait for pancakes but wanting it on record that he was waiting. Then he said, louder in the direction of the phone, "Hi, Evelyn." Nathan held the phone slightly away. On the other end, he could hear Evelyn's voice, the barely there breath of a laugh before she answered. "Hi, Marcus." "Are you coming to Tuesday?" Marcus asked. "I'll be there," she said. "Okay." He appeared satisfied. He looked at his father. "Can I have 3? "You can have 2. 3. 2, and then we'll see." Marcus accepted this negotiating position and reached for the orange juice. Nathan turned back to the stove, phone held between his shoulder and his ear, and finished the first pancake. "I should let you go," Evelyn said. "Probably." "Nathan." One more pause, brief, with something in it that she seemed to decide against saying, or to decide to say differently. "Thank you for being who you are about all of this." He looked at the pan. The next pancake going in, the batter spreading even and round. He was a janitor making Saturday pancakes for his son, while a woman with $3 billion told him thank you for being who he was. And the distance between those two facts was so large and so normal feeling simultaneously that he wasn't sure what to do with it, except let it be there. "See you Tuesday," he said. Bas. The piece about Renata ran on a Monday. He knew it was coming. Evelyn had warned him. But knowing something is coming and being ready for it were not the same thing. And he was not ready. He read 2 paragraphs of it before he stopped. The 2 paragraphs were not unkind, which was almost worse. They were careful, with the particular care of someone who knows they are touching something that hurts and wants it on record that they were careful. They described Renata as the late wife of the now famous janitor, which reduced her to a relationship and a clause in someone else's story, and Nathan closed the browser and put the phone face down on the table and sat with his hands in his lap and breathed. He sat there for a long time. Marcus was at school. The apartment was empty. The kitchen faucet dripped its habitual drip. Outside the window, the city moved at its usual pace, indifferent, continuous. He thought about Renata, not the paragraph's version of her, the relational clause, the late wife, but the actual her, the one that lived in him, specific and complicated and real. The way she'd argued with him about things she was completely wrong about and refused to back down. The way she'd cried at commercials and pretended she wasn't. The way she'd held Marcus the night he was born, not with awe, but with fierce, practical, bone-deep recognition, like she'd been waiting for him specifically and was glad he'd finally arrived. He sat with her for a while, in the quiet kitchen, letting himself actually do it instead of keeping it filed away somewhere manageable. Then he picked up the phone and called Mrs. Delgado. She answered on the first ring, the way she always did. "I saw it," she said, before he could say anything. "I already saw it." "I know." She was more than that. "I know." A silence that held everything it needed to hold. Then Mrs. Delgado said, "You're okay." It wasn't a question. It was the thing he needed to hear stated as a fact, rather than asked as a question, because questions required answers, and he wasn't sure about the answer yet, but the fact version he could hold on to. "Yeah," he said. "Come for dinner Thursday. Bring Marcus. I'll make the rice thing he likes." "Okay." "And Nathan." Her voice was its usual direct warmth. "They can write what they want. They don't know her. You do. Marcus does. That's what's real." He nodded even though she couldn't see it. "Yeah." He hung up and sat for another moment. Then he stood, washed his hands at the kitchen sink out of no particular necessity, just the need to do something with his hands, and started thinking about what to make for dinner. The faucet dripped. The city went on. Pets. The Thursday session that week was harder than usual, but it was hard in a way that was survivable. The kids knew something was different. Kids always knew. Not the specifics, they didn't read the news, most of them, didn't follow the story, but they felt the particular quality of attention that Nathan brought into the room with him, the slightly increased effort of his steadiness, the way the evenness cost something extra. Tomas noticed it in his way, which was to simply walk up to Nathan at the start of session and put both hands briefly on his forearm and say, "Mr. Nathan, you're here," with his usual joy, but holding the contact a beat longer than usual. Nathan looked at him. "I'm here, Tomas." "Good," Tomas said, and returned to his spot. Deshawn caught his eye mid-session and gave him a nod that was very old for 9 years old. The nod of someone who understood that sometimes things were difficult, and the way you acknowledged that to someone was just to let them know you'd seen it. Even Felix, who generally operated in his own internal world, looked up from his rhythm sticks at one point and said, clearly and without preamble, "I like coming here." "I like having you here, Felix," Nathan said. The session went on. Lily arrived 12 minutes late, unusual, she was almost always early now, and came in with a face that was doing a specific kind of work, the kind of work Nathan recognized because he'd been doing it himself all week. She set up without speaking, went through the warm-up, did the partner work with Marcus, and at the end she stayed. This time she didn't say anything for a long while. She just sat, and Nathan sat across from her, and they were quiet, in the way they had occasionally learned to be quiet together, comfortable with the space. Then Lily said, "She cried again last night." Nathan didn't ask who. "In her office with the door closed. I could hear it through the door." She turned her wheels forward an inch, then back, a habit she had when she was thinking. "She never cries. Not in front of me. Not ever." "She's having a hard time," Nathan said. "Because of me." Lily said it flatly. "Because of the video and everything. Because of her board and the company stuff. Because I went onto a dance floor and now everything is—" "Stop." Nathan said it gently but firmly. "You didn't cause this. You went onto a dance floor because you wanted to dance. That's all you did." He looked at her. "Everything after that is adults behaving like adults, which is often messy and not your fault." Lily looked at him. Her eyes were dry. She wasn't crying, wasn't close to it, but there was something behind them that was working very hard. "I don't want this to go away," she said. "The Tuesdays and Thursdays, you and Marcus, the gym." A pause. "I don't want it to go away because people online can't mind their business. It's not going to go away." "How do you know?" He held her gaze. "Because your mom told a board of directors no, and I don't think she does that lightly." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing. "She told you about the board?" "She did." Another beat of quiet. Then, with a precision that was very much her mother's, "Do you talk to her a lot?" Nathan looked at Lily's face. The careful question, the dark, serious eyes, the thing behind them that was doing math. He said, "More than I expected to, yeah." Lily looked at him for a long moment. Nathan held the look and did not perform neutrality because she was too smart for perform neutrality, and she deserved better than that. Then Lily said simply, "Okay." Just that. "Okay." With a weight to it that wasn't quite acceptance and wasn't quite permission and wasn't quite something else, but held all three of those things somewhere inside it. The gym was quiet around them. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Outside, the city moved at its usual indifferent pace, and somewhere across town a board of directors was trying to decide whether one girl's laughter was worth the trouble, and somewhere a journalist was writing a story about people he didn't know, and somewhere the internet was doing what the internet did, In here, there was just the gym and the battered equipment cart and the sprung wood floor, and a man who had been a janitor and a girl who had been a ballerina, and the improbable, difficult, completely real thing they had both, over the past months, decided to build in the space between who they used to be and who they were still figuring out how to become. Lily turned her chair toward the door, stopped. Without looking back, she said, "She likes you, you know." Nathan said nothing. "I just thought you should know," Lily said. She rolled toward the door, pushed it open, and was gone. Nathan sat in the empty gym for a moment. The lights buzzed. The cart sat in the corner. The floor held the faint marks of the evening's movement. He pressed his palms flat on his knees and looked at the middle distance and thought about a woman on the phone at 7:42 in the morning saying, "You don't have to perform being fine." He stayed like that for a while. Then he got up, finished putting the equipment away, and turned off the lights. Evelyn's statement went out on a Wednesday morning. She hadn't told Nathan she was going to do it. He found out the same way the rest of the world did. It appeared on Heart Capital's official channels at 8:15 a.m., and Patricia sent him a text 4 minutes later that said simply, "She wanted you to see it at the same time as everyone else." Her words. He read it on his phone in the parking lot of the office building where he had a morning shift, engine still running, heat on against the February cold. The statement was not long. Evelyn had written it herself. He could tell immediately, not because he was an expert in her writing, but because it had the same quality as her speech. Direct, no decorative language, no corporate softening. It said that she had been asked by members of her board to publicly distance Heart Capital from Nathan Cole and the Eastside Community Center program. It said she had declined to do so. It said that her daughter had, over the past several months, reclaimed something she had lost, and that the person most responsible for that was a man who had refused a salary specifically because he understood that some things lost their value the moment money touched them. It said that she considered that kind of integrity rare, that she was grateful for it, and that she was not in the business of apologizing for things she didn't regret. The last line was, "My daughter is doing well. She asked me to make sure I said that." Nathan sat in the parking lot for longer than he meant to. He thought about Lily in the gym the night before, saying she likes you, you know, and then rolling through the door like she hadn't just detonated something quiet and significant in the middle of his chest. He thought about Evelyn at 7:42 in the morning saying, "You don't have to perform being fine." He thought about the photograph on her desk. Young Lily mid-leap, tiara crooked, feet off the ground. He thought about a lot of things he had been keeping in a careful internal drawer marked, "Not right now," and he let himself think about them for exactly as long as the parking lot allowed, which was another 4 minutes before he was late. He got out of the car and went to work. The response to the statement was large and immediate. Nathan tracked it in his peripheral attention the way he'd been tracking all of it, at a distance, without looking directly at it, aware of the shape without letting himself get swallowed by the detail. The broad shape of it was, most people responded positively, some people responded negatively. Several business publications ran analysis pieces about whether Evelyn's public challenge of her own board was a sign of leadership confidence or leadership instability. And 3 of those pieces mentioned Nathan Cole as either a symbol of something good about human nature or a liability, depending on the political lean of the publication. Richard Hale, the longest-serving board member, gave a brief and carefully worded statement to a financial reporter that said, essentially, that he had concerns about the precedent being set, but that he respected Ms. Hart's decision-making authority. Reading between the lines of that statement required no particular expertise. Nathan read it and thought about a man he'd never met deciding what kind of story he was, and felt the specific irritation of that before letting it go. What actually changed in his day-to-day life was less than he'd expected and more than he'd prepared for. Less because the noise, which had been building for weeks, peaked quickly after the statement and then began slowly to recede. The interview requests slowed. The calls to his building manager stopped. People who had been following the story with urgent intensity moved on to other things, the way people always did. The internet had the attention span of a caffeinated child, and Nathan was grateful for it. More because the quality of his interactions with people who knew him shifted in a way he hadn't anticipated. Dennis at work, who had been carefully neutral through the whole period, shook his hand one morning and said, "Good people, Nathan. in the compressed way of men who have strong feelings and limited vocabulary for them. The parents of the kids in the program started staying after sessions. Not all of them, not always, but more than before, standing around the equipment cart, talking to each other, occasionally to him, with the ease of people who had decided they trusted the space. Tomas's mother brought tamales one Tuesday and left them on the equipment cart without explanation. And when Nathan thanked her, she waved him off like gratitude was beside the point. Small things. The kind of things that didn't make stories, but made life. The first time Nathan and Evelyn spent time together outside the gym, it was not a date, and neither of them called it that. And both of them knew what it wasn't and what it might be becoming, and neither of them said anything about it because saying things too early ruined them. It was a Saturday in late February. Lily had asked Marcus at the Thursday session whether he'd ever been to the Children's Science Museum downtown, and Marcus had said no. His dad kept saying they'd go, but they never went. And Lily had said that was a tragedy, and she could fix it. And somehow by the end of the session, it had been established that the four of them would go on Saturday. Nathan had watched this arrangement develop with the slight helplessness of someone observing a natural phenomenon. He'd caught Evelyn's eye across the gym during the negotiation phase, and she'd looked back at him with an expression that was equal parts amusement and the careful awareness of two people acknowledging something without quite touching it. "Saturday," she'd said when the kids were getting their things. "Saturday," he'd agreed. The museum was crowded in the way children's museums were always crowded on Saturdays. Strollers and noise and the particular ambient chaos of several hundred small humans in close proximity to things designed to be touched. Marcus was immediately absorbed by an exhibit about bridges and spent 20 minutes trying to build a span out of foam blocks that would hold his weight, with the focus of an engineer and the structural instincts of someone who should not be an engineer. Lily navigated the space with the practiced efficiency of someone who had mapped every doorway before committing to a direction, and she found the accessible routes without drawing attention to the finding, which Nathan noticed and respected. He and Evelyn walked behind the kids with enough space to talk and enough distance from each other to be just two adults accompanying children. "How are you sleeping?" she asked. He thought about it honestly. Better than 2 weeks ago. Still not great. Same. She had her hands in her coat pockets, which was a different posture from her office posture or her gym posture. More relaxed. The professional architecture not entirely gone, but not in full deployment either. "Patricia told me I looked tired at the Monday meeting, and I considered firing her." "But you didn't." "She's been my assistant for 4 years. She's seen me look tired at 100 Monday meetings." A pause. "She brought me coffee after she said it, so I forgave her." He smiled. "Not a big one, but real." "How's the board situation?" "Stable, I think. Richard is still unhappy, but he's professional about it. The three who voted against the statement have moved on to being unhappy about a separate acquisition deal, which is more in their lane anyway." She watched Lily navigate a doorway ahead, precise and unhurried. "I think the public response surprised them. They expected more blowback than they got. Because they expected people to agree with them. Because they're used to being right about risk assessment," she said, without hostility. "They're good at their jobs. They just calculated this one wrong." A pause. "They calculated Lily wrong, which is a mistake that's easy to make if you've only seen her from the outside." He looked at Lily, ahead of them, who had stopped to look at a display of deep-sea creatures with the focused, critical attention she brought to everything that interested her. She was pointing something out to Marcus, who was nodding vigorously despite clearly having no idea what she was pointing at. "How is she?" he asked. "Outside of the sessions." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "Different from a year ago. Different in ways I'm still... I don't know the word." She seemed to look for it. She used to manage everything. She had a system. What she needed, what she'd be able to tolerate, what she wouldn't. She managed it tightly, and she managed it alone. And if I tried to help, she'd shut me out. She paused. "Now she argues with me." Nathan looked at her. "I know how that sounds," Evelyn said. "But she didn't argue before. She just withdrew. Now she pushes back. She tells me I'm being overprotective. She tells me I make decisions for her before she's had a chance to decide herself." A small, complicated sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Last week she told me I hover." Do you? Almost certainly. She said it without defensiveness. I've been hovering for 18 months. It's a hard habit to stop. She's telling you when she needs space, Nathan said. That's her trusting you enough to say it. Evelyn walked in silence for a moment. Up ahead, Marcus had dragged Lily toward the bridge exhibit, apparently having abandoned the structural engineering and moved on to advocacy. You're doing it again, she said. Doing what? The thing where you say the true thing that I already knew but hadn't let myself fully think. She glanced at him sideways. It's a little irritating. I can be less accurate if it helps. She laughed, a real one, brief and unguarded, the kind that came out before the composure could catch it. He'd heard it a few times now, and each time it was slightly different from the managed public version of her voice, more textured, more her. No, she said. Don't do that. They walked in the comfortable, specific silence of people who had moved past, needing to fill the air between them with sound. At the bridge exhibit, Marcus was attempting to explain to Lily the fundamental engineering principles of a suspension bridge, citing no sources and demonstrating no particular qualifications for the explanation, while Lily listened with the expression of someone counting the factual errors but choosing not to interrupt. She caught Nathan's eye over Marcus's head and gave him a look that communicated precisely and wordlessly. Your son is wrong about most of this. Nathan mouthed, I know. Lily's eyes crinkled at the corners. Evelyn, who had seen the exchange, put a hand briefly over her mouth. They had lunch in the museum cafe. Sandwiches and overpriced juice, a small table near a window. Marcus talking at a volume slightly above appropriate for an indoor space, and nobody correcting him about it. Lily ate half a sandwich and stole the other half of Marcus's chips, with the casual efficiency of someone who had decided certain social rules didn't apply to her. And Marcus noticed and was briefly outraged, and then was not, because Lily simply ate the chips with complete composure while maintaining eye contact, and Marcus apparently found this admirable. She does that thing my dad does, Marcus told Evelyn, indicating Lily, where she just stares at you until you accept the situation. She gets it from me, Evelyn said without apology. I get it from nobody, Lily said. I developed it independently. Nathan looked at Evelyn. Evelyn looked at Nathan. Something passed between them. Not the first something that had passed between them in recent weeks, but one of the clearer ones, a small shared moment of these children, these impossible specific children that carried more warmth than it should have for two people who were still officially nothing to each other. He looked away first. So did she. March came in cold and then warmed unevenly, the weather changing its mind every few days the way it did in the transition between seasons. Nathan started running again. He'd stopped the previous fall when his schedule had compressed, and he hadn't had space for it, and now he was picking it back up at 5:30 in the mornings, 3 miles through the neighborhood before Marcus woke up, with the particular clarity that early running produced, the kind where your head was just slightly too tired to generate anxiety and you got a clean half hour of simply being a body in motion. He thought about Renata sometimes on these runs, not with the sharp, specific pain of the early years, that had slowly, over a long time, become something else, something with more texture and less edge. He thought about her the way you thought about someone who was still present in you, even when they weren't present anywhere you could reach, in the habits she'd left in him, in the way Marcus's hands moved like her hands when he was concentrating, in the particular knowledge of having been known by someone completely and having known them back. He thought about what she would have said about the past several months. He had a fairly clear idea. She'd been sharp and funny, and she'd had no patience for people who made things more complicated than they needed to be. And she would have looked at him going through all of this with his careful distance and his managed steadiness, and she would have said, "Probably, Nathan. You know what the thing is, just say what the thing is." He ran his 3 miles. He went home and made breakfast. He took Marcus to school. He knew what the thing was. The difficulty was that the thing was complicated by about 40 factors, including, but not limited to, their very different lives, their very different circumstances. The fact that the primary relationship between them was built around her daughter. The fact that getting it wrong would hurt Lily, who could not afford to be hurt. The fact that he was a janitor and she was a billionaire, which was not a thing he was ashamed of, but was a real difference in how the world treated each of them. And the fact that he was not, at this point in his life, someone who moved toward things quickly or easily. He also thought about Lily saying she likes you, in the gym, with her face carefully composed, and the weight in those 4 words that he'd been thinking about since. The thing complicated itself. He let it. No. The Tuesday in mid-March, when everything shifted a little, was not a dramatic Tuesday. It started as a normal session, warm-up, rhythm work, partner exercises, the free movement period at the end that had become his favorite part of the week. The kids had been coming long enough now that the free movement period showed you something different each time, some small evolution in how they inhabited their own bodies and the space around them. What Nathan noticed that Tuesday was Lily. She had started working, in the past few weeks, on something he hadn't directed her toward and hadn't discussed with her. He'd watched it develop without comment because comment would have put a frame on it that might have made her self-conscious, might have turned it from a private exploration into a performance. What she was doing, slowly, carefully, in the sessions, and he suspected at home, was working the boundary of what her body could do. Her injury was incomplete. That was the medical word. Incomplete spinal injury, meaning the pathways weren't entirely severed, meaning there was sensation and there was potential, though the extent of that potential was something nobody had been fully able to quantify. Her PT had told Evelyn the same thing they always told people in Lily's situation. It was individual, it was unpredictable. Effort and time were the only variables anyone could actually control. Lily was controlling them. It was in small things, the kind you only saw if you were watching carefully and regularly. The way her core engagement had changed over the months of rhythm work, tighter, more controlled, her upper body movement becoming increasingly connected to a lower body awareness that was becoming incrementally and with enormous effort something like intention. The way she sometimes pressed against the floor with her feet during the seated exercises with a focus that was different from the warm-up focus, more private, like she was listening to something inside herself that she hadn't fully announced yet. That Tuesday, during the free movement period, he watched her move her wheelchair to the edge of the floor, near the wall, and do something he hadn't seen before. She locked the wheels. She placed both hands flat on the armrests, and with a careful, concentrated effort that was visible in every line of her body, she pushed. She rose 3 inches from the seat. Her arms shook. Her jaw was set in the expression he knew well. The Lily is doing something hard expression that she wore when she was determined not to let the hardness show on her face, which never entirely worked. She held it for 4 seconds. Then she lowered herself back down. She looked up and found Nathan watching. He held her gaze. He didn't react, didn't make a sound, didn't change his expression, because this was hers, and she'd decide what to do with it. After a moment, Lily said, "Don't tell my mom yet." "Okay." I want it to be a thing before I tell her, not just a maybe." She pressed her lips together. "You know?" "I know," Nathan said. He did know. He understood the particular need to let something be real to yourself before you let anyone else have an opinion about it. He'd lived in that need for years, about Renata, about Marcus, about what he'd lost and what he was still, slowly, becoming. "How long have you been working on it?" he asked. "At home? About a month?" She looked at her hands. "In sessions longer. The arm strength stuff." She glanced up. "The upper body work, I knew you knew." "I did," he said. "I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Is it going to work?" And here was the place where a lesser version of him would have said something reassuring, something that felt like hope, but was actually just the shape of hope without the substance. He'd seen people do it. The bright, confident, "Of course it will." That was about the person saying it more than the person hearing it. He said, "I don't know. Your body is doing something it wasn't doing 6 months ago. Whether that becomes what you're hoping for, I genuinely don't know." He paused. "I know that the work you're putting in is real. I know that the direction you're moving is the right one. The rest, I can't promise you." Lily looked at him for a long moment. "That's the most honest thing any adult has said to me in a year." "Your mom's honest with you." "She's honest about most things. About this, she's—" Lily turned her wheels forward an inch, back an inch, the thinking gesture. She wants it so much it gets in the way of her being honest. She tries to hide it, but she's not as good at hiding things as she thinks she is. Nathan thought of Evelyn reorganizing the pantry at 1 in the morning. Thought of her hands flat on her desk, the deliberate placement of the coffee mug, the managed composure with the real thing visible at the edges. "She's getting better at it," he said. Lily looked at him with the specific shrewd look she sometimes had. "She told you about the pantry thing." She mentioned it. "She doesn't tell people things like that." Lily said it without accusation, just the factual directness she applied to most things. "She's been different with you." She paused. "Different in a way where I don't think she knows it's happening." Nathan looked at the middle distance and thought carefully about what to say, which took long enough that Lily made a small impatient sound. "You don't have to say anything," she said. "I'm not asking you to say anything." She unlocked her wheels. I notice things." "You both notice things. Neither of you says them." A pause. "It's very boring to watch." He laughed, and she looked satisfied with herself in the particular way she sometimes did when she'd gotten a genuine reaction from an adult. "Come on," she said. "Session's almost over, and Marcus is about to ask if there's snack." On cue, from across the gym, Marcus's voice. "Is there snack today?" "No," Nathan called back. "Was anyone going to tell me that, or were we all just going to let me hope?" "The latter," Lily said, loudly enough for him to hear. April brought the first warm days, the kind where the light came back into things, and the city's general color changed. Nathan noticed it on his morning runs, the quality of the air, the sound of birds he hadn't heard since fall, the way the neighborhood looked different when the winter compression lifted. Things between him and Evelyn had shifted, quietly, without either of them making a decision about it. They talked more. Not just updates about Lily and the program, but the kind of talking that happened when two people started treating each other as people rather than as roles in each other's situations. She called sometimes, not through Patricia, just directly, and the calls lasted longer than they needed to for any practical purpose. She told him about her company, not the public version, but the actual version. The years before Heart Capital was a name anyone recognized, when she'd been running on no sleep and borrowed money, and the particular stubbornness of someone who has bet themselves on a thing and cannot afford to be wrong about it. She told him about her father, who had been a difficult man in the specific way of men who love their children but can't figure out how to show it without turning it into pressure, and how she'd spent her 20s trying to prove something to him that she'd eventually realized she was only proving to herself. He told her about Pacific State, about the professor who taught his adaptive movement seminar, a former dancer named Dr. Okafor, who had been relentless and brilliant, and who had told him, in his last week before withdrawing, that talent was the least interesting thing about a person. He told her about the night Marcus was born and the particular fear of that, the specific fear of a man whose wife was sick and who was watching her give everything she had to bring a child into a situation that was already fragile, and how Marcus had arrived yelling, loudly and completely himself, and Nathan had held him and felt something that wasn't hope exactly, but was in the same direction. He told her about the years after. She didn't say she was sorry in the performative way people said it. She said once, "You kept going," in a tone that was simply observational, stating something she found significant. He said it wasn't heroic, it was just the only option, and she said sometimes those were the same thing, and he didn't have an answer to that. They were careful with each other. Not cold, the opposite of cold, in fact, but deliberate. The way people were when they understood that the thing they were approaching was fragile and valuable, and they had both, at different times and in different ways, lost fragile and valuable things, and didn't take the risk lightly. Lily watched all of this with the expression of someone monitoring a chess game in which she had opinions, but had decided not to offer them, mostly. In late April, she cracked. It was after a Thursday session, she and Nathan putting equipment away together. Marcus gone home with Mrs. Delgado because Nathan had a late shift and Evelyn was picking Lily up at 5:15. Evelyn was already in the parking lot. Nathan could see her car through the small window in the gym door. Lily was putting the rhythm sticks into their bag with great deliberateness. Then she stopped. "Can I say something without you doing the calm adult response thing?" she asked. "I can try." "She's happier," Lily said. She kept her eyes on the rhythm sticks. "She doesn't do the pantry thing anymore. She laughs on the phone, like real laughs. And she thinks I don't notice, but I do. She put the last stick in the bag. She showed me a picture of a place outside the city last week. A house with a big yard. She said she was just looking at listings, but she's never shown me house listings before. She looked up at him. My whole life it's been apartments, high-rises. She said houses were inefficient. Nathan waited. She's different, Lily said, because of you. Not just me. You. You specifically. She held his gaze with those direct dark eyes. I'm 10. I have an incomplete spinal injury and I've spent the last year building walls. I'm not exactly bringing a lot of fun into the house. That's not... Let me finish. He stopped. I'm not feeling sorry for myself. I'm just being accurate. She and I we've been figuring it out. It's gotten better, but she was still... Before the program before you, she was running at about 40% of herself. Efficient, controlled, completely present, and running at 40%. A pause. Now she's not. The gym was quiet around them. Outside, Evelyn's car sat in the parking lot, visible through the small window, and Nathan could see the vague shape of her through the windshield. I'm not going to pretend I don't know what you're saying, he said. Good. Lily turned her wheels toward the door. She's also terrifying, and she will argue about everything, and she has approximately zero patience for inefficiency, so just be prepared. Lily. She stopped at the door. Thank you, he said. She considered him for a moment. Don't thank me, just stop being careful for no reason. That's all I'm asking. She pushed through the door. He stood in the empty gym. Outside, he heard the car door open. Heard Lily's voice and Evelyn's voice. Lily's telling her something that made Evelyn laugh, and the sound of the laugh came through the door's old seal and reached him in the quiet gym and sat in his chest like something he'd been carrying in the wrong position and had finally set down the right way. He gave them a minute. Then he picked up his jacket and his keys and went out. Evelyn was leaning against the car. Lily was already inside. When Nathan came through the door, Evelyn looked up from her phone. She'd been looking at it but not reading it. He could tell the difference now, and she straightened slightly. Good session? She asked. Good session. She studied him for a moment. Something in her expression shifted slightly, just enough. A question she wasn't quite asking, and a readiness to hear the answer. He said, Are you free Saturday? A pause, brief and real. Lily has her PT in the morning. After. She held his gaze. After I'm free. There's a place 3 blocks from the community center. Good coffee, according to several people who are more qualified than me to assess that. Evelyn looked at him for a moment with the expression he'd learned to read as her actual face, rather than the managed version, the one with the tiredness in it and the humor in it and the thing she didn't often let show, which was simply that she felt things completely and without the composure she was so good at performing. Saturday, she said, after PT. He nodded. She got in the car. Through the window, he could see Lily in the back seat, very deliberately looking out the other window with the satisfied composure of someone who had decided their work here was done. Nathan stood in the parking lot until the car turned the corner. Then he walked to his own car, sat in it for a moment, and called Mrs. Delgado. She answered on the first ring. I have a Saturday thing, he said. A pause. Then Mrs. Delgado said, with great precision, A thing with whom? Evelyn. A longer pause. He could hear her settling into her chair, the slight creak of it, and he could almost see the expression on her face. The one she wore when she'd known something was happening before it happened and was not going to pretend she hadn't. I'll take Marcus, she said. It's just coffee. I know. It's not a big thing. Nathan. Her voice was warm and direct and slightly exasperated. I will take Marcus. You go have your coffee. He sat in the parking lot in the spring evening light and felt the particular lightness of a person who has been carrying something alone for a long time and has just, without announcing it, put some of it down. Thank you, he said. Saturday came. He met her at the coffee place at 1:30. She was already there when he arrived, 2 minutes early, which he suspected was her being deliberately less punctual than she naturally was, since she struck him as someone for whom on time was actually 5 minutes early. She was in jeans and a gray sweater, and she looked up from her phone when he came in with the expression of someone who had been slightly nervous and was not going to say so. They sat for 3 hours. He hadn't sat and talked with someone for 3 hours in longer than he could precisely remember. They talked about Marcus, the questions he asked, the way he processed things, the particular quality of his stubbornness that was somehow both infuriating and admirable. They talked about Lily's PT session, which had shown something encouraging that her therapist was cautiously calling progress. They talked about what it was like to raise a child alone, and she said that alone was a strange word for it because you were never technically alone, but there was still this particular kind of solitude at the center of it. And he said yes, that was exactly the word for it, that solitude at the center, and she looked at him with something open and undefended. He told her about Renata, not the paragraph version, not the late wife of version, the real version, the one he almost never told anyone. She listened without trying to fill the spaces, without the careful sympathy that people sometimes deployed like a buffer. Just listened. And when he was done, she said simply, "She sounds like she was worth knowing." "She was," he said. "She would have found you intimidating." Evelyn's eyebrows went up. Intimidating. "She would have also thought you were great, but first intimidating." "What's the intimidating part?" He thought about it. "The certainty. The way you move through rooms." He paused. "She was like that too, actually. Different version. She didn't have your composure, but she had the same solidity, the same quality of being completely herself." He looked at his coffee. "She would have liked you, after the initial judgment period." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. How long was her judgment period, typically? "About 45 minutes. Then you either passed or didn't. And if you didn't, then you didn't." He glanced up. She was not in the business of pretending people were different from what they were. Evelyn smiled. Not the brief managed one, but the real version, the one that involved her whole face. "I think I would have liked her too." He believed that. He told her so. The coffee place got busy around 3, and they moved to a bench outside in the April sun, neither of them suggesting it as a decision, just both standing when the noise got too loud and both going outside as if it had been planned. The sun was warm in the direct way of early spring sun, committed, making up for lost time. He sat 2 feet from her on the bench, and they talked until 4:30, when she said she had to get back for Lily's dinner, and he walked her to her car, and they stood on the sidewalk in the late afternoon light. "This was good," she said. "It was," he agreed. She looked at him with the undefended expression, the one that was just her, no composure architecture, just the actual person. There was a moment that could have been several things, and he was aware of all of them. And he was also aware that he was not going to rush it, that he had the patience for this particular thing that he'd earned through years of not having the luxury of impatience, and that the moment would be there again. "Next Saturday," she said. "Next Saturday," he said. She drove away. He walked back towards where he'd parked, past the coffee place where they'd sat for 3 hours, past the beginning of the block that led to the community center, past the ordinary Saturday afternoon street with its ordinary people and its spring light and its unremarkable beauty. He thought about Lily locking her wheels and pushing up 3 inches with shaking arms and 4 seconds of effort. He thought about progress, what it actually looked like, how it almost never looked like what you imagined, how it was almost always slower and more incremental and more costly than the stories made it seem, and how it was still, despite all of that, completely worth it. He walked in the spring light and did not count anything at all. May arrived and the program swelled. 2 new kids joined, a girl named Sadie and a quiet boy named Ray, bringing the group to 10, which was more than Nathan had ever run at once. He'd wondered if the dynamic would shift with new people, if the particular chemistry the group had developed would lose something with the addition. It didn't. It changed, which was different from losing something, and the change was mostly good, the way change in a living thing was usually good even when it was uncomfortable. Lily took it upon herself to orient Sadie and Ray without being asked. She didn't do it the way an adult would, no formal introduction, no organized guidance. She just appeared beside them during warm-up and said, "The first 3 sessions are confusing. After that, you'll know what's happening. If you have questions, ask me or Marcus. and then moved back to her spot. Ray looked slightly stunned. Sadie immediately asked 3 questions, all of which Lily answered with accurate brevity. Marcus watched this from across the gym and said to Nathan quietly, "She's kinda bossy." "She is," Nathan agreed. "It works, though." "It does." He ran the session. He watched the 10 kids move, different bodies, different abilities, different approaches to the rhythm, different relationships with their own limitations, and their own possible... And he felt the thing he felt increasingly these days, which was the specific satisfaction of a person doing work that was right for them. Not perfect work, not without difficulty, not without the sessions that went badly, or the kids who had hard days or his own exhaustion on the mornings after late shifts, but right, in the way that things were right when they matched the shape of who you actually were. He thought about the degree he hadn't finished. He thought about Pacific State and Doctor, Okafor and the movement therapy seminar and the life that had been interrupted before it could become itself. He'd spent years carrying the half-finished degree as a loss, as a marker of the things that hadn't been. And somewhere in the past several months it had started feeling like something else. Not a loss, but a thread. Still there, still possible to pick back up in some form. He hadn't said anything to anyone about this. He was still letting it be real to himself before he let anyone else have an opinion about it. After the session, after the kids had gone, he sat on the gym floor with his back against the wall in the comfortable fatigue of a good Tuesday. He thought about Lily doing her careful private work at the edges of her own possibility. He thought about Evelyn's voice on Saturday afternoon, warm and real and no composure architecture, just the actual person. He thought about Marcus at 7 years old, already himself, stubborn and sharp, and so much his mother's son in the ways that mattered. He thought about what it meant to have something good when you'd spent years learning to live without it. The gym was quiet. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The sprung wood floor held the faint marks of 10 kids moving, the way good floors held the evidence of what they'd been used for. Nathan sat in it for a while, letting himself feel the weight of a life that was, for the first time in a long time, moving toward something rather than simply holding on. That was enough for now. That was more than enough. He turned off the lights and locked the door and walked out into the May evening, where the air was warm and the city was doing its ordinary thing, and somewhere across town, 2 kids who had decided to trust each other were probably already planning what they were going to argue about at Thursday's session. He drove home. He made dinner. He helped Marcus with math homework that Marcus understood better than he let on, because Marcus found it more interesting to argue about math than to simply do it correctly. The kitchen light was warm. The window was open. The evening came in. The performance was Lily's idea. Not Nathan's, not Evelyn's, not something that had been suggested by a well-meaning adult who thought it would be good for the kids. Lily had proposed it in October, at the start of what would have been the program's 2nd full year, during a Tuesday session when the group had been working through a particularly difficult sequence and something had clicked. All 10 kids moving together, briefly, with a synchrony that had never happened quite that cleanly before. And Lily had looked around the room and said, flatly and with the certainty she applied to most things she'd decided, "We should do a show." Nathan had looked at her. "A real one," she said. "Not for the internet, not for the press, for the people who should see it, parents, Mrs. Delgado, the people from the neighborhood who donated the equipment that one time." She looked at him. "Tomas's mother. She's been here every session for 6 months, and she always sits in the back. She should sit in the front." Nathan thought about it. "You'd want to organize it," he said. "I would want to help organize it," she said, with the diplomatic precision of someone who had been told more than once in her life that she was bossy and had made incremental adjustments to her language while retaining the underlying reality. "I think Marcus should also help organize it, so he feels involved. He'll mess up the schedule." "I know. I'll fix it after." From across the gym, without looking up from his rhythm sticks, Marcus said, "I can hear both of you." Nathan had said yes. He'd said yes partly because the idea was good, and partly because he understood what it really was. Not a performance for its own sake, but a marker, a declaration of something, an ending of the before and a real beginning of the after. Kids needed those sometimes. Adults needed them too, though they were less willing to ask for them. The planning took 2 months. Lily and Marcus operated as an organizing committee that was, As Nathan had predicted, an exercise in creative tension, Lily's precision against Marcus's enthusiasm, which generated a surprising amount of forward motion and an equally surprising amount of administrative chaos. The invitations went out in November. The community center's slightly larger main hall was booked. Nathan and the kids built a short program together, each child contributing something that was theirs. Not a polished recital, not a recital at all, really, but something more honest than that. A documentation. This is what we can do now that we couldn't do before. This is who we are in this room. Lily's contribution was her own. She told Nathan in September. Not dramatically. She told him the same way she told him most things of significance, in the after-session quiet with the gym nearly empty, while she put rhythm sticks in their bag with her particular thoroughness. She said, "I want to try to stand during the show. If I can." He'd been careful with his face. "Where are you with it?" "Better than April." She kept her eyes on the bag. "I've been working with my PT on it. She knows." A pause. "My mom knows now, too." He'd waited. "She cried," Lily said, "when I told her. In front of me, which she never does. She tried to stop and couldn't." She was quiet for a moment. "I didn't mind. I think she needed to." Nathan thought about Evelyn, about the version of her he'd come to know over the past year, the actual complicated person rather than the public figure. The woman who reorganized pantries at 1 a.m. and laughed on the phone and had shown him a house listing in the suburbs almost shyly, like she wasn't sure she had the right to want something simple after years of wanting enormous things. He thought about what it would cost her to watch her daughter try to stand and not know if it would work. "She's going to need to just watch," he said, "not manage it." "I know." Lily looked up. "I told her that. She said she knew. I don't entirely believe her, but she's trying." A small pause. "You should probably be near her, during." He understood. Okay. The year that had passed between April and this December was, like all years, made of things that were hard and things that were good, and things that were simply the regular texture of living, which mattered more than either the hard or the good because it was what held them together. The hard things. Nathan's morning shift at the downtown building had been cut in April. A contract change, nothing personal. Dennis had been apologetic about it in the compressed way he had. And for 6 weeks, Nathan had run the numbers, and the numbers had been uncomfortable. He'd picked up substitute work, unglamorous and inconsistent, and he'd gotten through it. But it had been the specific anxiety of a parent who is one unexpected expense away from a problem, and it had reminded him that the ground under his feet was not as solid as he sometimes let himself believe. Evelyn had not offered to fix it. He hadn't asked her to. When he'd mentioned it carefully, testing how it sat to say it out loud to her, she'd listened and not solved it, and said, "What do you need?" And he'd said he needed to figure it out himself, and she'd said, "Okay," and had not brought it up again unless he did. That had been the right response. He'd known it was the right response, partly because he'd needed it to be, and partly because by then he understood her well enough to know she'd given it to him deliberately, that it had cost her something to not fix it, and that the cost was a kind of care. The good things were harder to list because they were everywhere. The program. The 10 kids, now 12, who showed up twice a week with their particular selves and their particular ways of moving through the world. Mrs. Delgado, who had taken to coming to the Thursday sessions and sitting in the back with Tomas's mother, and the two of them talking in the comfortable way of women who had decided to be friends without making any formal announcement of it. Marcus, 8 now, growing fast in the way boys did, still loud, still himself, developing a precision with the rhythm work that he refused to acknowledge because he'd committed to a narrative of himself as someone without natural talent, and he wasn't going to let the facts interfere. And Evelyn. That was the largest good thing, the one he still sometimes looked at sideways because looking at it directly required a kind of openness he was still, slowly, learning to practice. The Saturdays had continued, had expanded into other days, had become the kind of presence in his life that you stopped counting because you'd stopped thinking of it as separate from your life and started thinking of it as part of it. She'd shown him the house eventually, not just the listing, but the house itself. On a Sunday in June, the two of them and Marcus and Lily driving out of the city into the kind of neighborhood where the streets had actual trees and the yards were real. The house had needed work. This was an understatement. The kitchen was 20 years behind, there was water damage in one of the upstairs rooms, the yard was less a yard than an aspiration. Evelyn had walked through it with the focused assessment she brought to everything, making notes on her phone, and Marcus had run directly to the yard and immediately fallen over a root with the ease of a child for whom falling was simply one of the available modes of locomotion. Lily had gone quiet in a way Nathan had learned to read as significant. She'd moved through the rooms at her own pace, with her particular thoroughness, and when she came back to where Nathan was standing in the front hallway, she said, without preamble, "The doorways are wide enough." He looked at her. "I measured," she said. She held up her thumb and forefinger at a width that was approximately the width of her chair. "All of them. They're all wide enough." He hadn't said anything. He hadn't needed to. Evelyn had bought the house. They moved in September, Nathan helped with the move, along with 3 of Evelyn's colleagues who apparently owed her favors, and Mrs. Delgado, who brought food and opinions, and had decided by the second hour that the kitchen layout needed to be entirely rethought. Marcus and Lily argued about which of the upstairs bedrooms was better, a negotiation that went on for the entirety of the moving day and was not fully resolved, but during which both of them kept saying my room and your room, rather than the room, which Nathan noticed and didn't mention. He drove home that night to his apartment, still his apartment, still where he and Marcus slept and ate breakfast and did homework, the lease running until March. And he sat in his kitchen and thought about the word home and what it meant and how it changed and how it was possible for a word to mean 2 things at once without either of them being less true. He'd re-enrolled at Pacific State in the fall, part-time, online, continuing from where he'd withdrawn. The university had a policy for students returning after more than 5 years, required some updated coursework, and he'd started those in September. It was slow. He had 2 classes and a full work schedule, and the program, and Marcus and Evelyn, and the general complexity of a life that had gotten larger, and slow was all he could manage, and slow was enough. Dr. Okafor had retired. He'd found out from the university website and felt a specific pang about it. The woman who'd told him talent was the least interesting thing about a person, who'd understood what he was trying to do before he'd fully understood it himself, gone from the place he was returning to. He'd written her an email through the university alumni network, not sure it would reach her, not sure what he wanted to say. 3 weeks later, she'd written back 3 sentences. "I remember you. I'm glad you came back. It was always going to be you." He'd read those 3 sentences 4 times and then put his phone down and gone to make Marcus's lunch. So, the night of the performance was a Thursday in December. The community center's main hall had been arranged with chairs, real chairs, borrowed from the church 2 blocks over, whose pastor had heard about the program through Mrs. Delgado and had shown up one Tuesday to see for himself, and had become a reliable source of borrowed furniture ever since. 43 people came. Nathan knew the number because Lily had made a seating chart. He arrived an hour before to set up and found that Lily and Marcus had already been there for 30 minutes and had rearranged 3 things from how he'd left them the day before. He looked at the rearranged things. "Those are better," he admitted. Lily looked satisfied. Marcus looked like he'd been waiting for this acknowledgement for the full 30 minutes. "Front row center is for Tomas's mom," Lily said, checking something on her phone. "Mrs. Delgado is next to her. Then Sadie's parents, Ray's dad. His mom can't make it. He said he's okay about it, but he's not entirely okay about it, so someone should sit with him during the waiting part." "I'll sit with him," Marcus said. Nathan looked at his son. 8 years old, still loud, still himself, and something else now that had come in alongside those things without replacing them. An attentiveness, a quiet generosity that he exercised without calling attention to it. "Good," Nathan said. "Thank you." Marcus accepted this with a shrug that was trying to be casual and not quite managing it. The families arrived between 6:45 and 7. The hall filled with the specific sound of people who knew each other gathering. Not the formal murmur of the charity gala, nothing like that, but the warm, overlapping noise of parents who had stood in the same parking lot for a year and had gone from nodding at each other to actually talking to each other. Deshawn's mother and Kezia's parents had become the kind of friends who texted each other about things unrelated to their children, which Nathan knew because Deshawn had mentioned it with the mild embarrassment of a 9-year-old whose parent had developed an independent social life. Evelyn arrived at 7 with Lily. They'd been together at the house all day, Lily having gone home after the setup to get ready, which she had strong opinions about. Evelyn was in dark clothes, simpler than her usual formal events, hair down, and she came to where Nathan was standing at the side of the hall and stood beside him. "She's nervous," Evelyn said quietly. Across the hall, Lily was talking to Priya and Felix with total composure. "She doesn't look nervous." "She's not going to look nervous," Nathan said. "She's going to look like that right up until it's her turn, and then she's going to do it." "And if she can't?" Evelyn said it steadily. She'd gotten better at saying the hard possibility out loud. It had taken months. "Then she can't, and it's still her, and it's still real, and it's still worth watching." He looked at her. "You know that." She held his gaze. The slight tension around her jaw, the tension that showed when she was managing something, eased, not entirely, but enough. "I know." He put his hand over hers briefly, and her hand turned under his and held it for a moment, and then the lights in the hall shifted, and it was time. Nathan stood at the front and said a few words. Not many, because he was not a natural public speaker, and he'd learned that the audience didn't need a preamble as much as the speaker needed to feel like they'd given one. He said that the program had started with 3 kids and a Bluetooth speaker and a secondhand floor, and that it had become something that didn't have a precise word for it. He said that what they were about to see wasn't a recital. It was 12 kids who had shown up, kept showing up, and figured out something about themselves in the process. He said he was grateful, and he meant it, and then he sat down. The program ran 55 minutes. Deshawn went first, which had been his choice. He'd told Nathan that waiting made him more nervous than going, and Nathan had put him first because that was the right call, and Deshawn's instincts about himself were generally trustworthy. He'd choreographed his own sequence, 3 minutes of movement that was unapologetically, completely his. The loping energy, the prosthetic leg not hidden but present and working, the rhythm that came from somewhere in him that had nothing to do with instruction. His mother was in the 3rd row, and she made sounds that were not quite crying and not quite not crying, and Deshawn finished and looked directly at her and grinned the grin of a 9-year-old who knows he's just done something real. The Okafor twins performed together, which they'd insisted on despite Nathan's standing request that they branch out. And he'd let it go because sometimes the relationship between siblings was its own kind of movement, and it needed to be seen as that. Felix performed a slow, precise sequence with his rhythm sticks that was nothing like what you'd expect from a 6-year-old. All attention and intention, the room gone completely quiet for it. Priya's piece was the most technically impressive. She'd been working on something complex, something that asked her right side to do things it found difficult, and she'd gotten most of it. And the parts she hadn't quite gotten were still beautiful, in the way that effort was beautiful when it was honest. Tomas went last among the main group, before Lily. He'd prepared something, but what he actually did when he got to the front of the hall was stand for a moment, look at the audience with his open, uncomplicated face and say, "I want to do the one where we all count." Then he looked at Nathan. Nathan smiled. He stood up. "Okay, Tomas. Let's do the one where we all count." He brought all the kids back to the floor. They did the warm-up sequence, the breathing, the slow upper body movement, the rhythm they'd built together over months. And the audience counted with them, because the counting was contagious, and because Tomas had a quality that made people want to participate in whatever he was doing. The hall counted together, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And Tomas moved with his whole self and the pure joy of someone for whom this particular activity had never lost its pleasure, not for a single session, not once. When it ended, the applause was the kind that meant something. Nathan looked back at Evelyn standing near the wall where he'd left her. She was clapping with everyone else, and her face was the face he'd come to know. The actual face, nothing managed about it, just completely and openly present. Then it was Lily. She wheeled to the front of the hall. She'd dressed for it, not in performance clothes, not in anything theatrical, but in clothes that were hers, that fit the way she moved and the way she was. She sat at the front of the room, and looked at the audience for a moment with those dark, direct eyes, and said nothing by way of preamble, because preamble was not her style and never had been. The music started. Nathan had let her choose it. She'd taken 2 weeks and come back with something slow and instrumental, a cello piece, the kind of music that asked you to feel rather than think. She began to move. What Lily did in those 4 minutes was not a performance in the traditional sense. It was more like a statement. The upper body movement she'd developed over a year, fluid now, genuinely hers in the way Priya had said in December, arms that weren't checking themselves anymore. And underneath it, visible to anyone who was looking carefully, the effort of someone asking their body for something it had been slowly, quietly learning to give. 3 minutes in, she brought the chair to the wall. She placed her hands on the armrests. The room was completely still. The particular stillness of people who understand they are about to witness something and are trying not to interfere with it by wanting it too loudly. Nathan looked at Evelyn. Evelyn had her hand over her mouth. Her eyes were fixed on Lily. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that his shoulder was against hers. She didn't look at him. He hadn't expected her to. He just stayed there. Lily pushed. She rose from the chair the way she'd practiced 100 times in the gym and at home and in the PT sessions that her therapist had documented, with the careful optimism of a professional who had learned to hold hope without pushing it on her patients. She rose slowly, her arms working, her jaw set in the expression Nathan knew so well, and she came to standing. Her legs were shaking. That was visible. She was not going to pretend otherwise, and she wasn't. Her legs shook with the effort of weight-bearing that was still new and still costly, and she stood with the shaking rather than hiding it. One hand stayed on the armrest. Then she took 1 step, 2, 3, 4, the fourth slightly stumbling but corrected, the correction a kind of grace of its own. She stood, 4 steps from the chair, freestanding. The room did not immediately explode. It was quieter than that at first, a collective held breath releasing. A sound that was closer to the audience's own recognition of what they'd just seen than it was to celebration. And then someone started to clap, and it spread, and Mrs. Delgado was openly weeping, and Tomas shouted, "Lily!" at the full volume he brought to all significant announcements, and Deshaun pumped his fist once, sharply, with the precision of someone for whom excessive celebration was less meaningful than a single well-placed gesture. Marcus stood on his chair. Nathan saw this peripherally and chose not to address it. Lily stood in the front of the hall on shaking legs and accepted the noise with her chin up and her straight-backed posture and, slowly, a smile that started at the edges and took over the rest of her face until she looked, not like the girl from the gala, not like the girl who had rolled through a hotel ballroom a year ago and found a stranger with a mop and asked him to dance, but like who she was becoming, which was both more and less than any of those other versions, and more real than all of them. Evelyn made a sound against her hand that Nathan had never heard from her before. He turned, and she was not composed, not managing it, not performing anything. She was just a mother watching her daughter stand, and the sound she made was the sound of someone whose chest had been tightly held for a very long time and had just, in one moment, let go. He put his arm around her. She leaned into it completely, without calculation, without the professional distance that had been her first language for as long as he'd known her. She leaned in and he held her there, and they watched Lily take one more step, then carefully, without hurry, lower herself back into the chair. "I told you," he said quietly. Evelyn laughed, wet and real and not composed at all. "You said you didn't know." "I said I didn't know if it would happen. I knew she would try." A pause. "There's a difference." She pulled back slightly to look at him, her face entirely open. "There's always a difference with you," she said, "between the thing and the story about the thing. You're always very careful about that. Renata used to say I was pedantic." "You are," Evelyn said. "I find it comforting." Across the room, Lily had been rolled into a knot of people. Tomas with both arms around her, Mrs. Delgado with her hand on Lily's face, saying something in rapid Spanish, Deshaun and Priya and Felix all close, all talking, the specific warm chaos of people who have watched something happen and need to be near the person it happened to. Marcus appeared at Nathan's elbow, slightly breathless from having stood on a chair. "She did it," he said. "She did it. Nathan agreed. Marcus looked at his father, then at Evelyn, with the assessing look he'd developed. The look that was not quite his mother's, and not quite Nathan's, but had taken something from each and made it his own. He appeared to find the situation satisfactory. "Are there snacks?" he asked. Nathan looked at Evelyn. Evelyn looked at Nathan. "Yes," she said. "I brought them. They're in the kitchen." "Real snacks or the rice cake things?" "The rice cakes are healthy." "That's not what I asked." "Marcus," Nathan said. "There are real snacks," Evelyn said, "in addition to the rice cakes." Marcus appeared fully satisfied. He pushed through the crowd toward the kitchen with the focus of a child who knows what he wants. Evelyn watched him go. "He's going to eat them all before anyone else gets there." "Absolutely," Nathan said. "I'm going to let him." She looked at him. "Why?" He thought about it. "Because it's a good night, and some things are just good nights and don't need management." Evelyn held his gaze for a moment, and something in her face settled. Not into composure, not into the managed version of herself, but into something quieter and more permanent. The expression of someone who had gotten to a place they'd needed to reach, and was taking a moment to know they were there. "Yeah," she said. "You're right." Later, after the snacks, after the families had gone, after Tomas had been hugged 9 times, and Deshaun had received the praise he was too cool to ask for, and Felix had carefully repacked his rhythm sticks, the hall was nearly empty. Nathan and Lily were the last 2 cleaning up, which had not been planned but had arrived naturally, the way things between them often arrived. He was stacking the borrowed chairs, and she was organizing the programs that people had left on seats into a neat pile with her characteristic thoroughness. "How do your legs feel?" he asked. "Like they did something today." She stacked 3 more programs. "My PT said the trembling is normal. Neurological reconnection," she called it. Like a signal that's been interrupted trying to find its path again. A pause. "I like that. Signal finding its path. It's a good way to think about it." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm going to walk across the gym by February," she said. "That's my goal. Across the gym without the wall." She said it the way she said most things she'd decided. Not as a question, not as a hope, but as a statement about the future that she intended to make accurate. "Okay," he said. "You'll be there?" He looked at her. "Where would I be?" She appeared to find this a satisfactory answer. She finished stacking the programs, straightened them with one precise tap on the table, and turned her chair toward where Evelyn was waiting near the door. Then she stopped. "Nathan." He looked up from the chairs. She was looking at him with the expression he'd learned to read as Lily, being completely honest. No composure architecture, no careful management, just the actual kid, 10 going on 11, who had taught herself to be harder than she needed to be and was, slowly, learning to put some of that down. "Thank you," she said, "for saying yes, that night." He held her gaze. He thought about a hotel hallway, a mop, a girl in a pale blue dress with white gloves and serious eyes reaching up her hand. He thought about how much had happened since that moment, and how none of it would have happened without it, and how that was not a debt or an obligation, but just the simple fact of how one thing led to another when people were honest with each other. "Thank you for asking," he said. She nodded. That was enough. That was exactly enough, for both of them. She turned and rolled toward her mother. Nathan watched them. Evelyn crouched slightly when Lily reached her, the way she'd stopped doing in the early days, the careful, overmanaged attention, and was now just natural about, just the movement of a parent toward their child. She said something Nathan couldn't hear. Lily said something back. Evelyn laughed, short and real, and put her hand briefly on Lily's shoulder. Marcus appeared from the kitchen with a paper plate and 3 remaining snacks he'd clearly been saving, eating one as he walked, and he joined Lily and Evelyn at the door with the ease of someone who had long ago decided he belonged in that configuration. Nathan stood in the half-dark hall with the stacked chairs and the empty room and the quiet that came after things ended, and he stayed there for a moment because he'd learned the value of staying in moments rather than immediately moving to the next thing. He thought about what he knew about the people in that doorway. Marcus, who was Renata in the best ways and himself in the worst ways, and completely his own person in all the ways that mattered. Lily, who had decided to trust something at enormous personal cost, and had been proven right to trust it, and who was going to do things with her life that nobody had the imagination to predict yet. Evelyn, who had learned, was still learning, the same way he was still learning, that control was not the same as safety, and that the things worth keeping were not the things you could protect by holding on tighter. He thought about himself. 33 now, tired in the sustainable way rather than the desperate way. A degree he was finishing, slowly, a program that had grown past what he'd imagined, a life that was larger than it had been a year ago, in ways he could feel but still couldn't entirely account for. He thought about the things he'd learned in this particular year that he hadn't known before. Not insights he could package neatly. Life didn't provide those, or it did, and they turned out to be wrong. But the kind of slow accumulating knowledge that came from paying attention to actual people in actual rooms over actual time. He'd learned that caring about someone was not a feeling that arrived complete. It was a practice. It was what you did on the difficult Tuesdays and the flat Thursdays when you showed up anyway, not because you felt like it, but because showing up was the actual substance of the thing rather than the precondition for it. He'd learned that the difference between a person who seemed fine and a person who was fine was usually one honest conversation that neither party had gotten around to yet. He'd learned that the instinct to protect the people you loved by controlling their circumstances was a form of love and also a way of telling them you didn't trust them, and that untangling those two things was the work of years and that it was worth doing. He'd learned that some things had to be allowed to be fragile before they could become strong, that you couldn't skip that stage, that the trying to be strong before you were ready was its own kind of damage. He thought about Renata. He thought about her in the way he thought about her now, which was different from how he'd thought about her in the years right after. Different, not because she was less present, but because she'd settled into him differently, was part of how he saw rather than something he was always seeing. She was in the way he listened to people. She was in the way Marcus asked questions. She was in the particular patience he had for difficult things, the patience he hadn't come by naturally but had learned from watching her. He thought she would have found all of this. The gala, the viral video, the board meeting, the community center, Evelyn, extremely funny in the way she found most things funny, which was without cruelty but without sparing anyone either. He thought she would have said, at some point, "I'm glad you're doing this." Not the board meeting or the program specifically, but the whole thing. The choosing to be in the world again, the allowing it to be good. He thought, not for the first time, that she would have been right about that. Evelyn appeared back in the doorway, the kids gone to the car ahead, and looked at him in the half-dark hall. Ready? He looked around the room one more time, at the sprung floor and the buzzing lights, and the empty chairs and the space where 10, 12 kids had moved together, been themselves together, figured something out together, in the way you could only figure things out when you were willing to be in the same room with other people and not hide from them. "Yeah," he said. "Ready." He turned off the lights. He walked out into the December night. Cold air, clean, the city's lights doing what they did. That particular brightness that had no purpose beyond brightness, the way cities illuminated themselves against the dark. Not because they needed to see, but because they decided dark was not the default. Evelyn fell into step beside him. Their hands found each other in the way hands did when they decided this was the arrangement. Not a decision, just a fact. Marcus and Lily were at the car, arguing about something with the comfortable energy of people who had been arguing about things for a year and had developed a vocabulary for it. Lily was pointing at Marcus's paper plate. Marcus was holding it out of range. They were both, Nathan noted, smiling. He stopped for a moment at the edge of the parking lot, not because anything required it, just because the moment was there and he'd learned to stay in moments, and this one was not perfect, because perfect was the wrong word for real things, too smooth at the edges, too neat, but good, genuinely, completely, unmistakably good. The kind of good that didn't need to be earned and didn't need to be justified and didn't need to be anything other than what it was. Evelyn looked at him. "What are you doing?" "Counting," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Not numbers," he said. "Just the good things." He looked at the car, the kids, the night. "It's a habit I'm starting." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How many?" He thought about it, thought about all of it. The whole long year, the Tuesday mornings and the Thursday evenings, and the Saturday coffees, and the house with the wide doorways and the borrowed chairs, and the 10 kids who showed up, and the woman beside him who had said, "You don't have to perform being fine at 7:42 in the morning," like it was obvious. "More than I expected," he said. Evelyn looked at him, and her face was entirely hers. Tired and real and warm, nothing between them and it. "Yeah," she said. "Me too." They walked to the car. The December night held around them. Somewhere behind them, the community center went dark. The hall empty now, the floor holding its quiet record of everything that had happened on it, waiting for Tuesday.